Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, your Master of Fun and Wonder, your Chancellor of Cheerfulness, your Archbishop of Banterbury, and of course, lest we forget, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, with another episode of Robservations, the show about something. This is Robservations, episode number 392, and I am, of course, Robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Have an interesting barn burner of a show today for you, for all of you out there. I got some great letters. I got one letter that's highly critical of me, and I kind of like that, actually. I like people being highly critical of me and keeping me honest. So that's okay. That's a good thing. And it's great to be here on what's today? Wednesday? On a Wednesday. First of all, I wanted to take this opportunity to give a shout out to Bill Hunt at thedigitalbits.com for giving a shout out to the upcoming Hills Run Red Blu-ray that, of course, director Dave Parker and myself have been feverishly making special features for. We can't announce what the special features actually are, but he did say that there was over 4 hours of new special features. Actually, if you include the audio commentaries, there's probably a lot more than that. Maybe 5 or 6 hours of special features, but I'll let Scream Factory release that information when they see fit and when everything is delivered. Everything is not quite delivered yet, even though we are working towards that goal. Ladies and gentlemen, new information dropping just before I went on this show. You know, I like with John Campy, I thought maybe we're never going to be able to do these shows during this time. Is there going to be any entertainment news? Is there going to be anything to talk about? But boy, was I wrong. There's plenty to talk about. And who's with me? Waiting for that 8th episode, the series finale of Devs to drop. I'm very excited. Very exciting. But the news that dropped right before I went on the show, I found pretty interesting. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. Because they also announced something on Deadline that I had never heard of before. And I'll flat out say, I love World War II stories. I'm fascinated with the period, what happened, how the world was engulfed. And it seems like all around the planet there's all kinds of different stories, and always have been fascinated by World War II. But a story dropped about an upcoming World War II movie about something I had never read or encountered before, and it sounds absolutely bonkers and right up my alley. This was on Deadline. The Last Ridge. Hacksaw Ridge, backer Argent, 9 Days producer Mandalay, and book club writer, director Bill Holderman team up for World War II pick about the 10th Mountain Division. I was like, what is that? Wait till you hear what the 10th Mountain Division is. If you already know, you already know. But if you don't know, if you've never heard, like me, about the 10th Mountain Division, listen to this. They're teaming up on a feature adaptation of World War II tale, The Last Ridge, about the 10th Mountain Division, a troop of U.S. expats turned soldiers who helped turn the tide against the Nazis in Europe. Holderman will adapt McKay Jenkins' nonfiction book, which charts the remarkable true story. When World War II broke out in Europe, the American Army had no specialized division of mountain soldiers. That changed after an amateur skier named Charles Minot, Minnie Dole, convinced the U.S. Army to let him recruit an extraordinary assortment of expats, wealthy ski bums, mountaineers, and thrill seekers, and form them into a band of alpine soldiers. I mean, right there, you've basically a bunch of extreme sports fanatic expats decided to fight Nazis. There's your pitch, and I'll tell you, I'm in. The group included, this is all true, by the way, the group included the Sierra Club's David Brower, Nike, Yes, Nike. Nike co-founder Bill Bowerman and Aspen Skiing Corporation founder Friedel Pfeiffer. The men endured nearly 3 years of grueling training in the Colorado Rockies and forged 10th Mountain Division, which finally faced combat in the winter of 1945 in Italy's Apennine Mountains against the seemingly unbreakable German fortifications. It's crazy. Fortifications north of the Gothic Line. There, they planned and executed one of the most daring nighttime mountain attacks in U.S. military history, smashing a linchpin of the German army's lines. I mean, I read this, my mouth was watering. Just reading that paragraph, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, this doesn't even sound real. Indeed, it is real. The co-founder of Nike was part of this elite mountain group that went to war in the Italian Alps in 1945. I'm like, oh my God. I get excited about this stuff. I know. I get probably more excited than I should, but it's exciting to me. Argent's Jill Ahrens, Ryan Ahrens, and Ben Renzo, and Mandalay's Jason Mitchell Berman will produce the film with Holderman and Aaron Sims of their banner Apartment Story. Executive producers are Argent partners Drew Brees, Argent partners Drew Brees, Tony Parker, Michael Finlay, and Derek Brooks, with co-executive producers Eric Brumberg and Stephen Mitchell. Argent's Ryan Ahrens said, very few details about that U.S. Army's elite 10th Mountain Division have been introduced to the generations that followed World War II. This story is long overdue, so we're happy to be entrusted with the source material to tell a cinematic story depicting the courage, sacrifice, and heroism of this group of men. Well, all of you who listen to the show must know how much I love ski sequences in James Bond movies. And I think as the years have progressed, it becomes harder and harder to get Bond on skis. So, how do you get an action sequence, or how do you figure out how do you get a villain? How can Bond be on skis in the first place and be in a position where somebody's going to be shooting at him? We've seen great ski sequences on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Spy Who Loved Me, For Your Eyes Only. World Is Not Enough, not so good. And, of course, we had snowboarding in the beginning of View to a Kill. But, man, World War II soldiers on skis, come on. Come on. I am so in. It's like Where Eagles Dare with extreme sports. This sounds so cool to me. I can't wait to see this. I can't wait to hear everything about it. I read this and I was like, man. Mandalay's Jason Michael Berman added, I've had a very strong desire and passion to help tell the story of the heroes that made up the 10th Mountain Division ever since I first learned about them and their bravery while a teenager who often visited Colorado with my family growing up. Bill Holderman and I have been talking about this incredible true story since the first day we met at the Sundance Institute Labs in 2014. It's so exciting to collaborate with my close friends and partners at Argent, Jill, Ryan, and Ben, to bring this project to life with Bill and Aaron. Holderman, well known for the hit 2018 comedy Book Club, which took in more than $100 million, and Bill Bryson's story A Walk in the Woods, commented, this is one of the great untold stories in American history, and I'm thrilled to be partnering with Jason, Jill, Ron, blah, 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 blah. I can't wait. I'm so in. I'm so into this story. The idea of this is just so up my alley. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I'm very, very excited. I'm very excited. But the story that I wanted to talk about is right before I went on Deadline. It wasn't right before. I just read it before I went on. But it was this morning on Deadline. Anthony D'Alessandro reports, and Joe Goldsmith report that Cinemark, another large theater chain like AMC, Cinemark has decided to reopen its theaters around July 1st. Which I think is admirable and optimistic of them, so good on them. I don't know how practical it is, but I figured I'd read about it. Figuring that the COVID-19 crisis will calm by the summer, Cinemark's CFO and COO Sean Gamble today told investors and financial analysts in a special conference call that the chain is looking to ramp up by July 1st, with employees coming back roughly 2 weeks prior in late June. That said, openings could be state by state, county by county, per Gamble, scaled by demand with possible reduced hours and days of the week. That said, Gamble cautioned that it could take 3 months before the circuit is experiencing normal levels of business. We won't be everything back day one, but we'll dip our toe in approach, said Gamble. Cinemark CEO and board director Mark Zorati added that there will be 2 weeks of showing library product, high-profile library product, as the chain expects a slow flow of attendance. The big blast-off anticipated here is the weekend of July 17th through 19th, which is when Warner Brothers' Christopher Nolan's Tenet is blasting off. Now, John Campea and I have been talking a lot about Tenet. They have never moved Tenet off of its date. I think that they always hoped that theaters would be back so they could show Tenet. And it looks like that's what they're counting on. Gamble said that the profitability for the circuit can be achieved on occupancy levels of 20% to 30%. So should social distancing local ordinances be in effect, we can execute that successfully and profitably, successfully and profitably. Our lowest attended month had occupancy levels of 10%, and we still operated profitably. The late June period will be used to begin marketing again to consumers, particularly the chain's 12 million addressable consumers. Security is more important than growth, Zorati said. What got us to this strength of position is that we were relatively conservative and didn't chase multiples beyond what we were unable to do. Zorati's statement was in response to analysts' query on the call on whether or not Cinemark would be scooping up other theaters that might need a lifeline at this time. As debt starts to settle in and when the COVID crisis starts to decline and we get confirmation of when theaters will reopen, we will certainly consider them, said Zorati. With all of the uncertainty, we are very pleased to operate and open, and there's going to be a time and opportunity to consider that at a later date. At this time, we're not considering M&A opportunities. As far as theater closures due to the COVID-19 crisis, the CEO mentioned that there weren't any plans beyond what we already planned, meaning every year there's a handful of losses that expire. Every year there's a handful of leases that expire that the circuit considers renewing or not. But no, there aren't any planned closings due to the economic distress from the coronavirus. In regards to ticket pricing in the face of I can't read because I don't have my glasses on. You know what? It'd be better if I did. Let's just put my glasses on, huh? Then I can see. In regards to ticket pricing in the face of safety, local and state ordinances that could be in place, Zorati said we'll charge less when we start to get people back with high-profile library product. We'll be able to make deals with studio partners prior to the big tentpoles coming. I don't anticipate we'll charge more for tentpole pictures, said the Cinemark boss, should social distancing guidelines be enforced. Zorati also emphasized that how 60% of the chain's auditoriums have recliners, there's already a degree of social distancing in place at the chain. He envisioned two possibilities in regards to spacing moviegoers, in which Cinemark would sell every other seat or suspend reserved seating for a period of time, selling only 50% of the seats. We'll let the consumer know they're walking into a highly clean, highly sanitized environment. And then it goes on. Obviously, this issue is a big issue. And everybody wants the economy open. Who doesn't want the economy open? Everybody wants to go back to work. I mean, clearly that's what everybody wants. The economies of the world need to continue. We can't spiral into the Great Depression without a fight. However, what I personally find concerning about all of this talk about opening all of the economies. And by the way, I say this with no training as a medical professional at all. I'm just thinking in terms of being pragmatic. Again, if I was thinking about producing a movie, which I think about producing movies every day, if I was producing a movie, let's just say I was producing a movie and I had to make sure, as all movie producers do, that safety is first and foremost for your crew. The question that I would ask, and I mentioned this on the show, is we need to get everybody tested. The only way that we know we're ever going to be safe is if the people, if everyone knows who has and doesn't have the virus. That means you have to have testing for everybody. If there is not enough testing where everybody in a geographical location, wherever they're opening movie theaters, are, and I mean everybody, if we've had outbreaks or something, if you're near to if you're in a state where there's COVID cases, I don't think you should ever take back social distancing or stay-at-home orders until people can be tested, because the only way you can prevent this is to know who has the disease, period. And that's what I don't see a lot of. We don't have enough tests in this country. And until we do, we can't open it. We can't afford, what you're going to open the stock exchange? The commodities exchange, movie theaters, sporting events, all of that. Wherever there's large gatherings of people, unless the people know that they're not sick and the people around them aren't asymptomatic and carrying the virus, you can't do this. So what I don't understand is, before all of these questions of when we're going to open the country are answered, the question has to be, where are the tests and when do we start testing everyone? And once we can do that, we can look at models like South Korea. They test everybody everywhere, and they know. And if you are carrying the virus, you get sequestered away for 2 months or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or however long, and then everybody that it's not about social distancing. You don't want to go into a movie theater if somebody's sick, if you're only sitting a couple seats away. That's I mean, there are bathrooms, there are refreshment counters. I mean, the public, whenever you go get your sodas now, it's self-serve. So I find it interesting that would be the first thing on anyone's mind, is that we have to make sure that our customers have been tested. That should be the first thing out of everyone's mouth. At least that's the way I see it. I could be wrong. I'm not a doctor or a health professional, but I would like to say that I have a particular affinity for disease stories. I love reading stories about, not just stories, but nonfiction books. I mean, Richard Preston, come on, man. I ate that shit up. And it's the first order of business is you got to find out who's sick. And we can't open our economies till we know that, because you're just going to start a resurgence and it'll just keep going. And it's not like the deaths are tapering off, obviously, if you look at the numbers in our country. We've been hit the hardest. We've had the most deaths. And I was watching some people from Boston just now on TV, and they haven't hit their peak in Massachusetts yet. So anyway, I want to go to the movies. I want to see Tenet. I want to get everybody tested. I want to get the hell out of my house. You know what? I broke down. There's a place on the corner. I was socially distanced. Elizabeth and I went and had a hamburger. I went and got a burger. I know you can make them at home, but it was delightful. I don't think I had one in a month. So there you go. Anyway, that's my story about Cinemark opening maybe in July, which is sort of wacky. Now, I got a letter from our old friend, The Head. I don't know if anyone remembers. If you're new here, you might not remember. I haven't had a letter from The Head in a while. The Head is an imagination connoisseur, clearly watches the show, and has a lot to say. And I think there's a reason why he calls himself That Head. The Head, That Head. This is That Head. Now, I'm going to say, like, Mike Bodden sent me this letter, and he said, don't read this letter. And I don't know if Mike knows that That Head is used to be a frequent contributor. I haven't heard from him in a while. But it's highly critical of me. Now, I have no problem with that, and I actually thought it was pretty funny. So I'm going to read it, but I don't expect everybody to jump to my defense or anything, even though I appreciate it that you might want to. But I don't think that there's, again, every person has a story to tell. So, and I often look at these things as something I can learn from, and it's going to lead me into something else I wanted to talk about, so that's okay. So here is a letter from That Head. Rob, you're fucking up, man. You ramble on like a meth head way too often. It's very cringe. I wince more often now than agree with you. You're not as good as you think you are off the cuff. Those damn letters are stripping away your facades. Your inner ass-kiss ooze is slowly seeping out and contaminating the audience. It basically took you like 10 minutes to say Trump wasn't a good enough daddy figure for you because he's easily trolled and not a well-coached enough liar. He doesn't put on enough airs or ride a high horse for booby. Not a true director, my lord. That says more about you than him, honestly. You spent twice as long praising the great business leader Bob Iger, who I hear overspent Disney into the ground. Given that high praise was a bit before he helped piss on the Star Wars saga with, I guess, The Last Jedi. You said The Last Skywalker, but okay. Maybe you met the last Skywalker. You should bring up Bob Iger like once a week or every time you mention the Holocaust so the two become subconsciously linked in people's brains. You weren't making sense about Dune either. Get the fuck out of here with all those Walmart-looking still suits and that armor. Oh my God, lulz. You also said it doesn't matter if Liet is a woman. Makes me doubt you even remember reading the book, boomer. Liet was the leader of the Fremen, making him, Liet was the leader of the Fremen, making him a her, changes the Fremen's nature and their philosophy on survival leadership. Does it? One of my favorite scenes in the book is when they're all sitting around the table eating and sizing each other up. It's the second time the Atreides notice that Kynes is in command of the Fremen, who they may want to ally with. He also shuts down the guy across the table that Paul intentionally insults. It's an important part of the book, but like the Lynch version, I don't think it will now be included. They can't adapt it now by giving Kynes a sex change. If the Fremen were taking orders from a woman, she would have to have mad hand-to-hand fighting skills and or super strength, because that's how the Fremen call each other out, with a knife fight. If Denis Villeneuve and crew are asking the audience to believe women are as good in hand-to-hand combat as men, that would be too much to swallow. Talk about breaking verisimilitude. It seems more likely that they have to do what Lynch did and slash the character's arc, which sucks because Liet in the book is a low-key intelligence badass. As a planetologist, he probably created the water catches too, but that's not relevant to my point. I see your boy Gem... Oh, and then he ends. I see your boy Gem Mint made an X-Men vid. I need to catch up. I was hoping that someone would make a vid like that. I might ask him to do a review on Blame, which will probably always be my favorite manga. I ordered a mixed case of Naked Wines for $95. Arrived today. Took 10 days, but the stores here in PA, I guess is that Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, what is that? Are still locked down. You can't buy wine and beer in supermarkets here. The beer club I'm in is having a sale. They have 10% off coupon if you spend $100. Like I said before, I got 12 750 milliliter bottles for just under $14 each on my last order. It was like 166, I think. But yeah, the club's open anyone to shop right now. It's filled with winter malt bombs too, if you're into those. Well, here is the heads. Hang on. Let me. I'm going to put the heads. This link in the live chat. I think it's very funny. I really enjoy how the head went from not liking me to offering me beer clubs. So I'll only put this in. So here you go. It's in the live chat. It's in the live chat now. I might call them and try and get a decent price on these tomorrow. Maybe I should get 2 mint chocolates. I don't know. And then he lists beer. 1 perennial artisan ale, Strange Roots experimental ales, Jorpin BV, and Brouwerge de Moulin, Brewery Tarot, The Brewery, Tell No Tales, Broken Bow Brewery, Chloe. You'll see. And then he goes on and gives a bunch of other lists. And then he goes on to say, I watched that musical, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, by Jacques Demy last night. I gave it 8 out of 10. I haven't rated a film that high in like 10 years. Haven't seen In the Mood for Love yet, but I did watch The Sound of Music. Wasn't that bad. I gave it a 6 out of 10. So I could go 6.5. I don't know. Time will tell. I've been on a Korean film binge lately, but I might check out Butt Boy 2019 by Tyler Cornack tonight, or the French cop flick Les Miserables by, I can't pronounce, Lajley. It's getting really good reviews. It's been weird. I've been having like a retro night and then a current night. I still haven't finished Ozark Season 3, but I'm sure going to binge Devs before I start Ozark. Maybe do Devs on the day the last episode airs. P.S. Stop bogarting the wine bottle. Maybe try and find a way to place it center stage the whole show. That way it's in the middle and not tucked away under your arm. Probably will fit on the armpit. I don't have my armpit. It'll probably fit on the toy shelf. Also, I demand an Elizaviews review of Grans, a.k.a. Border. So that's his letter. Starts out with, I would call it, constructive criticism. And then it ends with a very fine choice. Border is a Swedish film about a woman that looks like a Neanderthal working at a border crossing And it's a very interesting movie. I think that's actually a really, really good suggestion. And one of the writers, I believe, was the guy who wrote Let the Right One In. So there you go. That's a letter from that head. Now I want to talk about Liet Kynes. Here is the new Liet Kynes. Max von Sydow played Liet Kynes in the original David Lynch Dune. And of course, gender swapping is a big deal. I've received many since yesterday's show on the chats. People are talking and have written in on the comments section on YouTube that once again a lot of people are complaining about this gender swap. And I think that I'm of two minds about this. Like, I'm a purist. I like to read books, and I like to see movies made from those books that there's a fealty to the original text. I've always liked that. Now, this is Sharon Duncan Brewster, and she was in Rogue One, and she's playing Liet Kynes. And she actually told Vanity Fair in that article, what Denis had stated to me was that there was a lack of female characters in his cast, and he had always been very feminist, very pro-woman, and wanted to write the role for a woman. This human being manages to basically keep the peace amongst many people. Women are very good at that, so why can't Kynes be a woman? Why shouldn't Kynes be a woman? But who is Liet Kynes, and what is their role? And then this article goes on and talks about Liet Kynes in the Dune series. Liet Kynes is a planetologist in Dune, and as that had said, he might have been responsible for well, if you don't know the Dune story, so there's a group of people that live on Dune called the Fremen. They're basically the indigenous people of Dune, and on a planet where there is no water, and water being very scarce, you find out over the course of the story that the Fremen are sitting on gigantic millions, if not billions, of gallons of water in caches all over the planet Arrakis. And maybe Liet Kynes was responsible for that. And that head is correct. There is a lot of challenges in the Fremen world with knife fights and things like that. So that is very true. I have to say, like swapping out Starbuck in the new Battlestar Galactica, I don't have a problem with Liet Kynes being turned into a woman. Liet Kynes is also was the father of Chani, the love interest played by Zendaya in this movie. But Liet Kynes is Chani's dad. I have no problem making gender swapping it and making Liet Kynes Chani's mom. And I think it's, first of all, I don't think it's necessarily true. You know, we don't know what kind of fighters women can be against men. If they had trained all their lives, I would think that there's certain advantages that women might have in a knife fight against a man. Who knows? Sure, men might have a longer reach, but women could be necessarily maybe faster. Who knows? I have no problem with gender swapping characters if it's done correctly. Again, it all comes down to authorship and how well it's done. If it's well written, if it's considered and there's a lot of thought and foresight put into it, Liet Kynes is in fact a diplomat. Also, a stealthily. At first the Duke Leto doesn't know what Liet Kynes is up to or who Liet Kynes' affiliations are with. Suspects, but doesn't know. It's all very interesting, and I like the fact that they've done this. I think if you look at the cast of Dune, why not put more women characters in it when it was written in 1965? So Frank Herbert, you've got the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood. Certainly they're strong. So why can't you have this? I don't have a problem with it. I don't think it desecrates the character. I don't think it desecrates the story of Dune. There really isn't a whole lot that goes on with this character. Now, as many people, that goes on that couldn't be. What I mean to say is that there's a lot that goes on with this character, but that I don't think the gender necessarily is front and center, and nor does it diminish the character in terms of the story. And in terms of knife fights amongst the Fremen, oh, rest assured, you will see that in the movie. I did report on the script. I did read, of course, the script for Dune, and I thought it was excellent. And there's been a lot of reporting recently about the all of this stuff. Now, there was an article that dropped on Inverse that I wanted to share with you since yesterday that talked about 3 different changes that they were basing on this Vanity Fair article that dropped. And everybody's kind of going bananas. If you're a Dune fan, people are like, oh my God, they're changing it around. So here are the three things that they commented on. This is an Inverse column. Let me see who wrote this column. This is from Inverse. Ryan Britt wrote this. Dune 2020 reveals 3 ways Villeneuve will radically change the book. I don't think it's been radically changed. First of all, let me say right up front, having read the script, I don't feel it was radically changed. First thing, Lady Jessica's role has been expanded. In the story of Senner kicking ass, riding on horseback or sandworm or whatever, she was very well developed in the script, and I can say that I really liked the way that she was portrayed. And yes, there is more of a focus on her. Obviously, Paul and Jessica escape into the desert, but and they meet the Fremen. But I will say this. You never feel that, oh, they've bolstered her role to the detriment of anything else. No, if anything, in the context of a film, it works better. It absolutely did work better. Number 2, Liet Kynes is now a woman. In a gender swap that will remind some fans of Starbuck becoming a woman in the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, Liet Kynes will now be played by Sharon Duncan Brewster. In the Lynch movie, this role was famously played by Max von Double Life as the leader of the Fremen, essentially Dune's desert revolutionaries who are all about taming those sandworms. What Denis had stated to me was that there was I already read that. As Peter Jackson expanded the roles for women characters in Lord of the Rings, making this important character not a white guy is very exciting, according to Inverse. See, I find that strange because in the case of Dune, he would write in this article, making this important character not a white guy is very exciting. Why do you have to put that in an article when you're analyzing the changes in a story? What does the fact that he's not a white guy have to do with anything? Why not just celebrate the gender swapping? Why do you have to then go on and say, not a white guy? He was written as a white guy. Or he's written as Liet Kynes. The villain will be truly scary, not silly. One of the most problematic aspects of the Lynch version of Dune was the portrayal of Baron Harkonnen as a corpulent, disgusting, gluttonous, and fairly cliché evil person. He comes across as a weird stereotype, which kills some of the drama. In other words, bad guys don't need to be gross to be bad. The fact is something that Villeneuve has taken to heart with the new adaptation. He says, as much as I deeply love the book, I felt that the Baron was flirting very often with caricatures, says Villeneuve, and I tried to bring him a bit more dimension. That's why I brought in Stellan Skarsgård. Stellan has something in his eyes. You feel that there's someone thinking, and has tension and is calculating inside, deep in his eyes. I can testify it can be quite frightening. Apparently, the new look for Baron Harkonnen will be less about the character being a human Jabba the Hutt and more of a rhino in human form. This isn't literal, of course, but it does mean the danger in the new Dune will, for the first time ever, be rendered more complex and hopefully legitimately frightening. It's very interesting. I mean, I never felt that way about the Lynch version. I didn't see Baron Harkonnen. I mean, yes, he's evil and has strange predilections, but it was just very Lynchian more than anything else. It was very much in David Lynch's wheelhouse. I don't see his portrayal as being cliche at all. I see it being a David Lynch character, but it speaks to the larger, this, everyone's so quick to be like, oh my God, they've gender swapped these roles. Again, why don't we wait and see how it's portrayed in the film? Judging from his previous work, I think Denis Villeneuve is quite nuanced in his filmmaking. I think if you look at his oeuvre, he's done, it comes back to this idea that when do we respect people? I mean, whether you're talking about The Enemy, Incendies, Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, and now Dune, he has a body of work that is it demands respect. And I think that the fact that he's taking on Dune and the fact that you're working with John Spates, Eric Roth, and him to write the script. That's exciting. And I find it so strange that already we're going to pillory his work. I'm excited. You know, as the Chancellor of Cheerfulness and somebody who has read the book and grew up reading Herbert's 6 books, I can tell you, after reading their script, it is incredibly exciting to know that this is the kind of adaptation that we're going to get. The only thing we should worry about is we should be singing the praises of this filmmaker and what he's trying to do for science fiction cinema, specifically literary-based science fiction cinema, because if this movie does well, it could just open the floodgates for everyone's going to start looking and scrambling for the next great classic science fiction novel to make, and that can only be a good thing. But everyone's, getting all up in arms. People, our imagination connoisseur community, like, oh my God, how can you change? What difference does it make if it's presented correctly? If Liet Kynes is a man or a woman, because nobody believes that a woman can fight with a knife. You know what? There's been plenty of instances throughout history where we've had women that are very, very deadly with a blade. And I think it works. I do. At least in my mind it worked when I was reading the script. And I would just implore everybody, give the movie a chance, rather than be these purists that I have a friend that to this day won't watch Lord of the Rings because he's such a Tolkien purist. But if you're a Tolkien purist, why would you go see a movie at all? Why not just read the books? You've always got the books. They're always there. Movies are adaptations of the books. They're not translations of the books. And that's why I've always said, well, see what's out there. Check it out. Why deprive yourself of a great experience? And you never know. Could be great. I know the script was great to me. By the way, at this point, I should mention that in the weekend of April 25th and 26th, I will be moderating panels at the Mainframe Comic-Con. It's not WonderCon, it's not San Diego Comic-Con, but in fact, it is an online convention that I'm looking forward to seeing. I can't tell you right now what my panels are that I'm moderating, but I will in fact be there, and it should be kind of fun. At least I hope it's kind of fun. And yeah. So I think I'm going to start out. I got some good letters today. Good letters today. Very excited about today's letters. I'm just going to jump into them, and I'll jump in and out of the chats and these letters. A few from people I don't recognize. This one comes from, again, Enterprise H, NCC 1701H. I wonder what the Enterprise H looks like. Do we know? Is that a Star Trek Online ship? A Greater of Generations. Greetings. First, have you watched the game trailer I sent you? I did watch the game trailer. The one that's what we talked about yesterday, I think, from 10 years ago. It looks great. I thought it was cool. Secondly, you mentioned that you dislike the Star Trek movie Generations. What's your opinion on the game, given that the story differs from the movie? I've never played it. Do you like it more or less? I do think that stellar cartography makes for a better game interface. That's true. I'm not too proud to admit that there are some flaws which need rewriting, unlike some Picard fans, and I will not support to make it canon for that very reason, but I do like how the game made Soren feel like a true Bond villain. Yeah, I haven't played the Generations game. I am not a fan of Generations. I don't think Ron Moore and Brandon Braga, who wrote Generations, would differ with me on this one, as they will tell you, and indeed they did tell you in our Star Trek documentaries. They were sort of disappointed. They were they're writing the scripts for Generations and all good things at the same time, and I just think that Generations, again, I can't get past the central conceit of a spacefaring energy ribbon that somehow opens a doorway to something in there reads your mind and lets you live out a life that you dreamt of. I can't. That strains credulity to me. I can't buy into that. I mean, I can understand if there's an alien entity that's putting you in some kind of trance, like the Telosians or whatever, or you're put into a machine like the Matrix, or turned into a human battery so the machines can live off of you, but at the same time you get to live in the Matrix. I can buy all that, but a space-going energy ribbon, I mean, that's one dangerous, weird thing, but to say that that's also, as it smashes your ship, as it blasts the Enterprise B, Kirk is suddenly whisked out of there and placed in where exactly? Like, how big does this, there's too many questions. So to me, again, it's a different kind of an impossible premise. So I just never bought into it. And I think, Soren's plan, it seems so strange that he's going to blow up stars to move to the Nexus. Why does he just get a ship and fly into it? I guess I'm sure it could destroy ships, I suppose, but it didn't destroy the Enterprise B entirely. And we saw Kirk go into the Nexus. The whole thing, when I'm watching this, I'm asking myself, this movie makes utterly no sense at all. And the fact that, of course, unless you have a rocket that can fly faster than the speed of light, it would have taken a long time for Soren's missile to destroy the Viridian sun, but it happens almost instantaneously. And even I'm no physicist or rocket scientist. I'm like, wait a minute, you cannot fire a rocket. I mean, the sun isn't hanging in the sky literally. It's a long way away. It takes light 8 minutes to go from the sun to here. Can't buy into that. But I don't know if the game's good because I never played it. But I'm not a fan of Generations. I also couldn't stand the way Kirk was portrayed. But, that's neither here nor there. This letter comes from Regis Conan, spelled Konan. Hello, Grand Master of Imagination. I discovered your great channel not so long ago, and I must thank you for the fantastic display of sci-fi knowledge it contains. Why, thank you. I'm writing you these words to talk about my favorite science fiction novel, Dune. I just saw the images published by Vanity Fair. I still love a lot the 1984 movie for its amazing set design and costumes, even if it has since been disavowed by David Lynch. What I saw in the Villeneuve movie is very subdued compared to that. Dame Jessica doesn't look as grandiose. Villeneuve is one of my favorite directors, with Miyazaki and Satoshi Kon. Ooh, nice mention of Satoshi Kon. I'm a big fan. I love Paranoia Agent, too. It's Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and reserve my final judgment until the movie... By the way, Satoshi Kon passed away. I'll reserve my final judgment until the movie is finally released in December. I think I know at what part of the story the movie will end. Yes, I've read Dune in French, and the French edition of Dune is divided into 2 books, Dune 1 and Dune 2, before going on to Dune Messiah. So in France, the Dune saga has been effectively 7 books instead of 6. And Villeneuve is French, Quebec, but still. I know I'm extrapolating here, but I think there's a chance they will follow the French structure of the novel, and in this case, I think I know where the movie will end. I think you probably do. I think you probably do. Thank you very much for your wonderful show, Regis. Note, I wrote you some time ago about what you refer to as a failure of imagination. What are your thoughts on that? A failure of imagination. Did I have to be more specific, but I was talking about Star Trek Picard being a failure of imagination. And, yeah. I mean, here, maybe, so I don't know. I can't answer that, but I want to thank you for writing in. Write me back and tell me what you mean. I don't know specifically what you mean, but if you want me to talk about Picard again, happy to do so. I was doing it last night on another Inglorious, but another Trexperts podcast. This next one comes from James Kevins. Greetings, Rob. I've heard you speak from time to time about your love for the comic series American Flag by Howard Chaykin. I absolutely agree. It would be great to see it adapted to film or TV. Who would you cast as Flag? And would you include a Bob Violence animated short? Also, what did you think of Chaykin's Black Kiss series? Peace and long life. Jim Kevins. I would cast probably John Hamm. John Hamm would be my first choice. I don't know if he's too old, but maybe not. Maybe he's the perfect age. John Hamm I would cast as Reuben Flagg. And I think he would be great. Although John Hamm, I've seen him and he can be funny, but Reuben Flagg has to have a wicked, wry sense of humor. So that was the first person that jumped into mind. But if you wanted to do it as a movie and you needed to go bigger, you could go the Ryan Reynolds route, but he'd have to be directed. You'd have to pull back on the Ryan Reynolds and make him more Reuben Flagg. So that's who I would cast, and I would absolutely include Bob Violence. Bob Violence was this cartoon character, very satiristic. The problem with American Flag is so much of American Flag in the early 80s, American Flag, RoboCop borrowed from American Flag. American Flag has been mined so much that you would really need a deft filmmaker who had a real strong vision for the material. I would love to see someone like, I don't know, a David Fincher take on American Flag, but you'd really need somebody, I don't know who. I'd heard that Luc Besson's company had bought the rights, and our own John Suntress from the Word Balloon podcast had Howard Chaykin on, I think, yesterday. Now, I haven't watched that yet, but I was hoping that they would address this, because I know this was Luc Besson, who, by the way, if Luc Besson was on, he could do American Flag quite well. And Paul Verhoeven, I mean, if I could have had anyone direct an American Flag movie, it would have been Paul Verhoeven. I mean, he's in his 80s now. He's still making movies, but I think he might be obviously a little too old. I wish that there was a young, up-and-coming filmmaker. I'll tell you something. Here's an off-the-wall choice. Jeremy Saulnier, who directed Blue Ruin and Green Room, he might be able to pull off an American Flag film. He's never done any real, work with a lot of special effects, but it could be interesting to see him do something like that. I would be interested, but obviously American Flag is one of my favorite things in the world. It's right over there, and actually, it's right over there. I could go get it. Here, I'll get it. Why not? I'll get it, so people know what the fuck I'm talking about. This is the beautiful hardcover of Howard Chaykin's American Flag, and it's got shopping malls, and here's Chaykin's. I mean, let's see what's his gorgeous example of his panel design. Let's see if I can find it. Great. Well, you can't really tell, but here's the character of Reuben Flagg. For those of you who want to see, I'm thinking John Hamm would play this character. I don't know if that was the best way to. Well, actually, I can show you the cover of the book. You can see that's Reuben Flagg. So it's about a future America, and it's crazy. It's a crazy, weird, consumer, futurist, political. It's crazy. I love it, and it hasn't aged. It just keeps getting better. Some of it's age, I guess, but for the most part, I think it's really, really good. Now, let me jump back into what you guys have to say. Wow, there's a lot of people who have written in. Let's jump over to you guys. Let's see what you're saying. Okay, Timbula the Spider Monkey is here and says, finding myself with a lot of free time lately. I believe I'm using it wisely. I just finished rewatching the Canon Ninja trilogy. You gotta love Sho Kazuki. Those ninja movies are great, and I do love Sho Kazuki. Now, what about American Ninja? Are you gonna go watch American Ninja? That is a great way to spend this time, catching up with Canon movies from the 80s. And Sho Kazuki is a ninja. Come on, man. Calvin Bose said, "Indeed, I needed you to correct you on something. John Gardner's first book was not titled License Revoked. It was called License Renewed." Oh, was it? I wish they would adapt the books. I also missed the title of the next film announced in the end credits of Bond films. I know, they never know what it's going to be. Was that John Gardner book License Revoked or License Renewed? I'll take you might be right. I will take your I stand corrected, sir. I said that the first John Gardner book was License Revoked, but it was actually License Renewed. Okay, I didn't know that. Calvin Bose says, I just got a stimulus check and buying a new home theater system, but as a father of two small boys, must be on a budget under $500. Ooh. What would you suggest? Well, Calvin, I would say this. If you're going to buy a multi-channel audio system, which I think everybody should get, there's a great Nakamichi sound bar, but there's an Onkyo. Onkyo, is that how I pronounce it correctly? There's an Onkyo system that's like $400. Hang on. Let's see if I can find that Onkyo system. Yep. This is it. Here it is. I'm going to put this, and it is $300. It's $400, but you got to get speaker wire. So, yeah, you need speaker wire before you can hook it up. So I'm going to put this in the chat. I can't believe it. I'm advertising. I'm not even one of those partners with Amazon. And here I am sending an Amazon link out. Now you have to understand, this is not going to rattle your house, but it's as an entry level home theater system. It's respectable. You know, Onkyo makes good stuff, so I would say start there. Calvin goes on to say, Braxton, his son, suggested you should do Jesus Christ Superstar on your whining about movies. He wants to hear what you think. He loves the movie. Wow, isn't Braxton like 5? I love that he's watching Jesus Christ Superstar. Perhaps we should. I don't own Jesus Christ Superstar, but I'm sure we could find it. DC Marvel sends in a super chat and says, "Hey Rob, I think it would be amazing if you want to and have time to do a movie watch party. It would be amazing to watch with you live." Yeah, I've never done a movie watch party. Like, can you see me? Do we all see each other? Like, how would we do that? I think I might do that with Free Enterprise. I might have because I want to. I have a version of Free Enterprise that I did in widescreen, my preferred aspect ratio, and I did a few editorial changes, just speeded up the pace a bit. I'd be curious to see what people think, actually. Let's see. Journey's End sends in a super chat and says, when VFX is integrated with live action footage. Oh, that came in first. Okay, let me read this again. When working with VFX, is it best to have the artist animate on raw footage first, or have the colorist do a pass without animation and then the artist comes in? Ooh, when VFX is integrated with live action footage. That is an extremely great question. Okay, what Journey's Edge is asking, I'll give you an example. When you shoot if you shoot digitally now, which most people obviously are doing, your cinematographer can have what's called a LUT, which is basically, how is this footage going to look? How is it supposed to look ultimately? What is the table of how the color and the lighting, all of it, how will it look? What is the look of the film supposed to be? Now, when you're shooting raw, like if you shoot raw red files and you see what they look like, they're very milky. They look milky, like faded, or what is this? But that's only because they haven't had anything applied to them, a look applied to them. And that's what you do. You know, it used to happen photochemically, but now it happens electronically. Now, what Journey's End is asking is if you have a live action footage that you're going to integrate with effects plates, he's asking, should you color your live action footage first before giving it to your effects team? This is a very, very good question. And to be honest, I'm going to say it's a little bit above my pay grade. But what I would do first, because here's the thing. Nowadays, you've got power windows and you can isolate things and get them the way you want it. But I would say it's extremely important to the look of the movie. I would probably take my effects plates and I would color them first, working with my cinematographer, coming up with the look. But here's the thing about that too, is then if you haven't already color timed the rest of the movie, you might want to make things different. So I guess you'd have to ask. My first impulse would be no, unless you've already timed the entire film. If you graded the entire film, then I would say wait until that's done. But I think you'd have to really leave it flexible, unless you really know what you've done and you know what the look is. But I think that's a really good question. I think it really has to do with the kind of methodology that you want to use in post. And the problem is when you decide on a color timing or a color grading, if you decide on that up front, you're sort of locked into that. Because what happens is when you are color grading a full shot, you don't have the latitude because you're going to color grade the whole thing. Yes, you can use power windows and you can get in there and you can, if the effects are, say the effects are out a window or something, you can get in there with a power window and you can grade that section the way you want it. But I think it really depends. I mean, it really depends. Obviously, your DP should have the final say, and the way something is shot is going to affect how the effect is created and how the effect looks, especially if you want integrated lighting and things like that. But it's a really good question. I would take it on a shot-by-shot basis, really. And that's why you need a visual effects supervisor. A visual effects supervisor is vital, because when you have a visual effects supervisor on a movie, on a large scale movie, you have to, because that visual effects supervisor is sometimes jockeying 20 different vendors, and that visual effects supervisor is on set when you're shooting, is making sure that what you're getting is properly lit. It's something that's vital, and that would be a question ultimately I would leave up to your effects supervisor, because they'd be able to tell. But I think I would take it on a case-by-case basis. Willow says, Willow's here. Hello, Willow. I've just gotten 3 episodes into DS9. Am I just imagining it, or are the colors a lot more muted and darker in the show? Also, I do hope that Bashir gets less annoying. Bashir gets way less annoying, and the colors are more muted. Even the sets, of course, obviously, it's a Cardassian space station, Terok Nor, that has now been taken over and turned in and designated Deep Space Nine. But yes, it's a very different show. The lighting, they finally allowed shadows into the show. Next Generation was so brightly lit, but you're not wrong. And here's the thing about DS9. I'll tell you about the first season of DS9. It's a bit of a slog. And while it's less of a slog than season 1 of Next Gen, there's a lot of Deep Space Nine. They're still trying to figure out where it's going to go. And it's a show that also took time to develop. But I will say that Emissary, I love the pilot. I thought it was probably my favorite of all modern Trek pilots. And then the last 2 episodes of the season are essential. There's some good episodes in the first season of Deep Space Nine. It kind of is a little bit monotone, I think, if that's the word. But as the show, it just keeps going like this. It goes on an upward trajectory. And you might think, Willow, you might pick up on the fact that they keep trying to change the premise a little bit each season, but it doesn't bother me. I really love Deep Space Nine. As a matter of fact, there was a video I saw that I posted on Twitter. It was like a 7-year-old Deep Space Nine trailer that someone made. I found it on Vimeo. I wonder if I can find it now. Let me see. I'll see if I can find it. What's so great about even live? Let's see. Vimeo. Deep Space Nine trailer. Uh-oh. Here we go. Space Nine trailer. Let me see if this is the trailer that I found. I think it was on Vimeo and not on... Yep, here it is. This trailer is dope. And I think this trailer actually does a really good job of explaining Deep Space Nine's appeal. I really did like this trailer a lot. I thought the guide, it's mostly slanted to season 1 episodes, but if you haven't watched Deep Space Nine and you're ever worried about it, this trailer will tell you shouldn't worry and just watch, because it's very rewarding. And I guarantee you, the 6th season of Deep Space Nine is, in my mind, the finest season of modern Star Trek. And seasons 4, 5, 6, and 7. 7 is not as good as 6, but still, it's great. Mukbang Reviews says, I'm just starting Devs. I can't wait for its finale, but have to see 1 episode. But I've yet to see 1 episode. Sounds great. Loved Tales from the Loop. Rewatched it twice. I wouldn't steer you wrong, Mukbang. Now, Tales from the Loop obviously isn't for everyone. People have written into me and said it's too slow for them. And look, that kind of thing is right up my alley. It's the kind of science fiction I love. I have to tell you, I get excited for TV if I'm in. I don't think I've ever been as excited. And Devs is a low-key show. It is not histrionic. I mean, it's got a small number of characters mostly. And while there's a lot that happens in it, a lot of intrigue, a lot of stuff, as I said, episode 6 or episode 7 really freaked me out. It put the existential zap on my head. It's one scene. A lot of people have asked me, why did you think that scene was so... what about that? Well, it was the ramifications of the scene. I was thinking like, oh my God. It got to the point where, and I think I know what they're going to say or what's going to happen in this episode. I can't say it obviously, but I think I know where it's going to go, and I'm really excited to see how they resolve it. I can't believe it's going to end midnight tonight, man. Midnight tonight. I think it'll be on Hulu, and I'm going to stream it, or first thing in the morning, and I'll talk about how did Devs stick the landing, or did it end like Annihilation, where you're like, wait, what? Even though I understand kind of what he's going for. Our man Wiley Todd is here. Wiley Todd was who I did, the 20-year-old, the young 20-year-old gentleman I was speaking about, who has newly discovered the Bond franchise and has become a Bond acolyte. And not only that, very intelligent in the way he looks at and examines the films. And he reached out and asked me to be on his podcast. And we had a rollicking good time talking about Bond. So for those of you who are interested, I did post a link on Twitter, but look up Wiley Todd's podcast and watch us Bond out. Wiley Todd says, hello, Mr. Burnett. Thank you so much. It's so funny when people call me Mr. Burnett. I guess the gray hair. Hello, Mr. Burnett. Thank you so much for doing the Bond first watch interview. It was so fun and one of my favorite interviews, and it was a dream come true. Thanks, man. Let's do it again. Wiley, I will come on your show anytime. And by the way, you know, I love the fact that you reached out to me. Very respectful. You're absolutely professional. Very much appreciated that. And I thought your show was really good. And it was really fun talking to you. And I expect big things from you, sir. Big things in the future. And yeah, let's do it again. I mean, we could look at we could talk a Bond. We could do a movie. We could spend a whole hour talking about one Bond film. It's an excuse to rewatch them yet again. I'd do it. A spectator sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. Thank you for bringing joy into my life each day. You are truly the existential Mr. Rogers. Keep doing what you're doing on a daily basis. Do you know what movie you're going to do on the next Elizaviews? Well, tonight we are doing Russ Meyer's 1970 classic, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Written, of course, co-written by Roger Ebert. That is Elizaviews tonight at 8. It should be a barn burner. Elizabeth didn't even hear. She's never heard of that movie. Boy, I can't wait to see what she thinks of that. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, the thing with testing is that it's not enough with one test per person. A test shows a snapshot of infection status. A negative may be a positive 2 days later. I agree. You need many tests. I agree there too. A positive antibody test gives an answer that is valid for a longer time. Stubble, you are correct, sir. And the fact is, we don't have enough tests in this country at all yet. We are very, very far away from being able to effectively open the economy. I understand. You know, President Trump is not wrong to want to reopen the economy. Everybody wants to reopen the economy. It's just you have to be smart about it. What do we have? 26,000 deaths in this country now, and they're expecting. I mean, it's a lot of people, and that's exponentially. Those are family members. I mean, it's crazy. James Bonner says in a super chat and says, someone please tell the person who wrote the critical letter their use of the term boomer is incorrect. Yeah, it's funny to me. I don't think I'm not a boomer. I'm Gen X. I am a purebred through and through Gen Xer. Yes, I'm not a boomer. Not yet. Kind of like at the end of Gladiator, but not yet. A little Jaimin Hansu there. Not a very good Jaimin Hansu impression, but still Jaimin Hansu. The okay boomer thing, the fact that people throw that out is so stupid to me. Because half the time when people have said it to me, I'm like, and it doesn't work. It's not like it's when you call somebody a douche canoe. I mean, I understand you're talking about like in French, it's like a shower canoe. What? But we all know what it means in English. Douche canoe. It's an onomatopoeia. It sounds like it is. But boomer doesn't work. I mean, because boomer is very specific about a certain. It'd be like saying you're so 1970s if you were like born in 83. I mean, I guess you could be 70s. You could have the spirit of the 70s, right? But yeah, it's saying it doesn't work as an all-purpose takedown. It's lazy. Journey's End says, unfortunately, I think as long as gender swapping is trendy and virtuous in Hollywood, it will read as tokenism, even when it's a genuine creative choice. You know, it's funny to me because when Starbuck was announced, when Katie Sackhoff was announced to play Starbuck, there was a lot of people pissed that this character was gender swapped. Well, you can't do that. I mean, Dirk Benedict was such a great Starbuck, and he was, but to me, I never thought of Battlestar Galactica as some kind of, it wasn't sacrosanct. I mean, it wasn't like this holy thing that you can't change. It was never that good in the first place. I mean, even episodes I like the gun on Ice Planet Zero has these goofy clones in it. And there's some things that I really liked about Galactica, but I knew it was a Star Wars ripoff at best, and then it was sort of low-rent sci-fi at worst. And then they did some cool things in it. There was the light ship was cool, and the Experiment in Terra episode was cool with all of that. But nowadays, because so many people are doing it, because it's fashionable, that when it's done for purely creative reasons or legitimate creative reasons, I think now people see it as tokenism. The fact that Liet Kynes is now a black woman, I'm like, well, it makes sense that in the Dune universe, when you have the Bene Gesserit sisterhood, that they're not the only strong women in the world. And anybody who's a Fremen on Arrakis and can survive in that kind of an environment's got to be a pretty formidable human being. And Liet Kynes is also a brilliant scientist and a leader. And why can't you have a strong woman in that role? I don't know. To me, if it's presented correctly, and the fact, look, what is stronger? Look at Aliens. To me, I'm like, one of the strong characters ever in any science fiction film franchise is Ripley. And she's never been stronger than she was in Aliens. And what made her strong? Her maternal instinct. You know, none of the men were going to survive in that situation. I mean, obviously, of course, Hicks did, but he was wounded. And of course, Bishop was an android. But the whole thing, her very feminine core was what made Ripley a strong character in Aliens. I mean, if you watch the extended version, you find out she was a mother already. Amy, her daughter, lived and died while she was in hypersleep. And Cameron it was a great job. Her femininity and the fact that she had born a child who she never knew, and the fact that she was a mother and that Newt became her proxy daughter, that kind of maternal instinct is what gave her the ability to face down the alien queen, who was herself a mother. Well, I don't know maybe, who knows if you she was called an alien queen. I don't want to piss anybody off. You know, I don't want to misgender anyone or dead name anybody. I don't want to do any of that. But I will say the alien queen. See, I'm mindful. I get it. I'm respectful. I'll call you whatever you want. But you have to understand, in the world, sometimes people don't know these things, but I don't want a dead name or misgender anyone. But that's the alien motherfucking queen. And I'm going to say that there was something being drawn out where you had two feminine creatures and when I say feminine as opposed to masculine, the fact that they were mothers. Mothers is something I can never do. And maybe in the future I can have a rabbit test, like that movie where a man had a child, but until I can be surgically altered to do that, I can't. So I can look at Aliens and understand the parallel that James Cameron was trying to draw between Ripley going after Newt and then the alien queen wanting to protect her incubating newborns or her incubating facehuggers that would become, I don't know, who knows? But the idea that two feminine entities were clashing is what made, I mean, there was no man that could fight in that arena. That was what I thought was so cool. It was up to Ripley and her mothering instincts for Newt. She was the only person that could strap it on, and I mean strap on the grenades and the flamethrower. I know that Willow and Vesna are going, hee hee hee. I know, but you know what I mean. So I don't have a problem if there's a creative reason to do something and it works. I thought making Starbuck a woman in Battlestar Galactica was great. Swashbuckling male characters are a dime a dozen. We've been watching them for 100 years. I have no problem seeing Liet Kynes become a black woman on Arrakis who is a strong leader. I mean, so she goes from being Max von Sydow to being Tina Turner in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. I mean, I'm all about that, and she's a scientist to boot. I have no problem with that. And people are like, I understand that not every choice of gender swapping or race swapping is agenda based. I think it was those questions. Look at the cast. That cast is pretty. There's a wide range of people in that cast. I mean, you have ethnically mixed people. It's really interesting, and I think doing that, it fits right in with the movie Denis Villeneuve is trying to make. But again, the proof is in the pudding. Plus, I think she looks, come on, lest we forget. I mean, Leah Kynes. That's badass, man. I mean, I look at this character and I'm like, this could have been in a Chris Foss painting of Dune. I could have seen Alejandro Jodorowsky do a drawing just like this with that hair. Even look at that. To me, that's it. That more than anything we've seen in Dune so far represents to me Arrakis. And I if this is the Leah Kynes we're getting, and it is, I'm excited about that. This to me sums up in an image what I wanted from the film. And there is a verisimilitude here. Sorry, the head. I think this is great. I love what this looks like. And somebody said, well, I really liked the way that the Fremen still suits in Lynch's Dune started out black and then they became dusty. Well, look at this. Here's a dusty still suit. This is exactly the same thing. And, the problem is, remember, here's what people don't, it drives me bananas. Costumes in a movie are but one element of design. The costumes in a film have to fit with the rest of the design of the movie. And in the David Lynch version of Dune, even the uniforms, like the Atreides uniforms that they had, were very, I would say, a little stodgy. But the way everything was designed, the beautiful sets, it all worked together. Art direction isn't just, and costuming is not just about making a costume look good. The costume has to look good on the people, and then they have to look good in the world, in the milieu that the movie is set in. So I am willing to bet that once we see moving images and you've seen what the Arakeen, what it all looks like there, I'll bet you that these uniforms, people are like, well, it looks like a motorcycle. And indeed, it does. I get it. But I think in the world of the movie, it's going to look great. Because remember, things are designed, when we see individual images, they're taken out of context. But when you've descended into the world, you're not going to be nitpicking a single image. You're going to be nitpicking the entire mise-en-scène of the frame. And it's going to be a different experience altogether. So I'm excited. But I think Journey's End, there's a lot of needless and stupid gender and race swapping in these times. But I also think that there are times, look, Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption, Morgan Freeman in the book, in the story, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, but in Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, Red was an Irishman, not a black man. And I'm sure if the movie was made today, people would be like, ugh, they just went and race swapped the main character of the story. If you haven't read the story, can you imagine anyone else in the role of Red in Shawshank Redemption other than Morgan Freeman? You can't. And that, now people would say, oh, it's tokenism. I had to cast him. No. Frank Darabont cast a man, who cares what color he is, a great actor in a role that is unforgettable. I mean, I'm getting chills when that whole movie and that whole performance and the way they did it. Why do they call you Red? Maybe it's because I'm Irish. I mean, nobody would say, well, they put a black man in Shawshank Redemption. That's tokenism. No way. It was Morgan fucking Freeman. So I think that in the case of Leah Kynes, I'm going to reserve judgment. But I think looking at this cast, which is stunning, I think that we should we must trust in Denis Villeneuve's vision. And if we don't, well, then he screwed the pooch. But I don't think he's gonna. Having read the script, I just don't think he's gonna. I think it's gonna be good. Jason sends in a tip and says, I don't think the concept that politics and a leader interacting with the press should be like a director of a film set is a good analogy. Though I'm proud of the civil disobedience happening in Michigan to protest creeping fascism that's going on. Look, I didn't mean to equate a director on a film set necessarily with politics, but I was equating the idea of leadership in a situation where you have a diverse group of people that are all trying to make, in our case, we're trying to make a better country. And we need a figurehead, a leader that represents all of those people. And on a film set, a great director can relate to everybody that's on a film set from all different walks of life. And people on film sets are from all different walks of life. They do many different kinds of things. and having a great director who people can lead, who believe can lead them, is that was what I was trying to do. I was just, look, it's a film channel, it's an imagination connoisseur channel, and I wasn't trying to do that. But you know, when a leader gives a speech, can look out at the crowd, not at a teleprompter, and a leader can you feel that person, whoever it is present and really understands what's coming out of their mouths and the questions that are being asked and the ramifications of those questions, and they can speak extemporaneously on these subjects because they've been briefed. Sometimes, you know, hours at a time briefings might last, but you can't tune out. And certainly a director has asked 10,000 questions a day. If you had a director snap at somebody on a film set for really no reason, look, directors snap at people all the time on film sets, but usually when directors snap, it's because they're trying to make the film the greatest it can be. And a lot of people understand that. I mean, if you're an abusive director, to be abusive, again, it's another way to lose your crew. But you don't, I think a politician or a leader does not snap at reporters who are there to do a job. I mean, that's their job. And they've been doing it for hundreds of years. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to stop anytime soon, no matter how you try to delegitimize the press. It's one of our constitutional rights to have a free press. So, but I do understand what you're saying. Chairman Mao sends in a tip and says, oh, I was waiting for somebody to ask me about this. So Splash is now on Disney Plus, but Disney have used CGI to lengthen Daryl Hannah's hair so it now strategically covers more of her ass. What the fuck? It looks like she now has a tail. Here is the link. For those of you who have not been following current events, so Splash, a movie that was not available on Blu-ray except in foreign countries, but not here, Splash showed up on Disney Plus, and there is a scene when Daryl Hannah runs out into the water and she's nude, and you see her bare ass. You don't see anything else. She's running away from Tom Hanks and getting into the water. For its Disney Plus debut, they covered her ass with CG, and here's a picture. Apparently, I put it in the live chat, which is the dumbest thing in the world. Why, you know, the infantilization of children and our society never fails to, I don't understand it. You know, Americans, what, you can't show a woman who is nude, who's a mermaid, running into the water and she has her bare ass. That was how the movie was released. The movie is PG. It's a PG film. It was more endearing than anything else. Are you really kidding me that you're trying to convince children that a bare naked buttocks is somehow bad? The buttocks. I mean, come on, man. I find that kind of thing so irksome. And this idea, kids are smarter than that. Kids deserve better. They deserve better, Disney Plus. You know, I'll tell you, in Kind Hearts and Coronets, the end scene of the movie, one of the end scenes of the movie, the characters exchange the N-word. And you hear it and you're like, wait, what? It comes out of the blue and you're wondering, what does that all mean? And it was funny because at the beginning of the movie, it says this film is presented in its original format with cultural insensitivities intact. And I mean, I understand where that came from. It was a product of its time, but it was shocking to me. And, but at least they put the movie out intact. And the idea that, you know, when you do things like that, what you're doing is you're saying to children, you're stupid. And we deserve better than that. So shame on Disney Plus for doing that. Shame. Garen Gillum sends in a tip and says, Rob, speaking of World War II, a few months ago, I read that the makers of Band of Brothers are producing a miniseries for Apple focusing on the 8th Air Force, something I've wanted to see for a long time. I hope C-19 doesn't affect the production. I think all production has been affected. So, yeah, we'll see. I'm sure it'll happen. Look, a lot of this, people are just itching to get back to work. And I think with Tom Hanks' involvement and Apple, I think it's going to get made. And I can't wait. I agree with you. Anything to do with any of the Air Corps or the Air Force, anybody in World War II, I will watch. When I was a kid, I built so many World War II vintage era planes. Ugh, can't wait. So, Garen, you and I parking our shuttlecraft in the same shuttle bay. John Suntress is here from the Word Balloon podcast. Sends in a super chat and says, according to Chaikin, Flag was with Bassan's company, but Valerian bombed. Plus, Bassan's Me Too issues killed the deal. Oh, that means it's available. What I would give, ladies and gentlemen, what I would give to work on an American Flag. If only I could just make one more thing and it was commercially successful and I could have like some kind of ability to get projects greenlit. I could go, I'd get 5 slam dunk projects done. As a matter of fact, I was asked yesterday, a guy has been courting a project that I control for the last 3-4 years, contacted me yesterday. That reminds me, I got to get back to him. Because I would never lose, believe it or not. All the projects I would make, if I was ever given a decent budget and a decent release, would never lose. At least that's what I think. I'm a legend in my own mind. But I'd like the opportunity to prove it to anybody that I'm right. Gerald sent in a super chat and said, is there a compelling reason to get Peacock streaming service now? For those of you who don't know, Peacock, the Peacock streaming service, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, NBC Universal streaming service is available today for Comcast customers. How cool is that? I don't know if it's very cool. I don't know. Gerald. I don't know what's on Peacock. Do they have anything at launch? I mean, the rest of us can't get it until when? July, but I don't even know what's on it. Heidi Boyers is here. Heidi Boyers sends in a super chat and says, hello, Rob, Detective Jim's wife, Heidi. Well, everybody, first of all, if Detective Jim's wife, Heidi, is watching this chat, all of us owe her a massive debt of gratitude. The Burnettwork, Robservations, all of you imagination connoisseurs, for please tell Heidi that we are eternally grateful that her husband is loaned to this channel through thick and thin. He's like the U.S. Postal Service of moderators. He delivers no matter what kind of weather is out there, no matter what kind of hardships going on. Detective Jim Boyers is on the job. Now I know he's retired, but I just think it's delightful that you're married to Detective Jim. So tell us stories, Heidi, of your what's he like as a husband and a father and all that. Was he like was he a haunted cop, like one of these hard-bitten guys that you see in movies? I've seen a video of him. He didn't look that hard-bitten, and you have a great backyard. But I'd like to believe, that Jim Boyers, Detective Jim, was a character out of a movie. Jim Boyers is a movie detective name. I love that. As a matter of fact, he should write a series of detective novels set in your hometown and just keep the name the same. Don't even change it. Detective Jim Boyers. I love that. Be great. Let's see. But thanks for the super chat, Heidi. By the way, the name Heidi's great. Love the name Heidi. Not because of the connotations of Heidi, but I just like Heidi. I've always liked that name. Jeremy Mannanen is here and sends in a super chat and says, do you play D&D or any other tabletop RPGs? You know what? I used to play D&D. I played D&D, Traveler, Boot Hill when I was a kid. I rolled up an entire complement of crew of a Constitution-class starship for the Star Trek role-playing game. But I sort of got out of that. I never got back into it. I do like tabletop games, though. Good ones. Like, I remember when Amanda Schuckman and couple of people I know introduced me to Secret Hitler, and you had to pick out who's the fascist and who's Hitler. I love that game, which is kind of like the game The Thing, which is kind of like Werewolf. I like those games. They're fun, but I don't play D&D. Like, I don't get in. I know a lot of people in Hollywood that do. Obviously, they get into very long campaigns, but I don't. Abdul Alans sent in a super chat saying, hey Rob, Disney Plus releasing a docu-series of The Mandalorian behind the scenes. Hopefully more original content starts rolling out afterwards. For those of you who don't know, my friend Jason Hillhouse, that I used to work with at Curdy Pellerin on the Lord of the Rings movies, him and his lovely wife, is working on this. And Jason Hillhouse also, he usually works for bigger companies. He hasn't, as far as I know, hasn't gone out on his own, but he does incredible work. He's worked on a lot of DC properties and comic properties. Jason Hillhouse announced that he is one of the producers behind these documentaries. It's going to be the part of the Disney Gallery series, whatever that is, but it's going to be an 8-part show dedicated to the making of The Mandalorian. I hope they do it episode by, I hope they do episode by episode. I think that would be very cool. And they announced that today, and I believe it starts in May. May? I don't know. So yeah, Abdul, I'm very, very excited. Stubble McShave says, I can't remember now, is Kynes described as white in the Dune books, or are we defaulting to white when it's not spelled out? This gave me an idea for a letter expected soon. I don't remember. I don't know. I mean, here's my. I will tell you you can say what you want about me after I tell you this, but when in my mind, when I'm reading books about the future, the far-flung future, Dune takes place in the year 10,191, the time of Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV, my father. I just assumed human beings are all mixed. I see them all. I don't see anybody. I don't think in 10,000 years there's going to be many. That's why I like shows like The Expanse, all the different kinds of people that you see on it. People are going to be mixed, as they travel. When you go off-world, we're all going to be, when you can travel around the world, if you've got transporters in the future, and like Picard can go from Le Bar, France to beam in to the front of Starfleet Command. If you can roll around the planet as much as you want, and look, if you want to go, like, I would love it if you could travel around the world, and like, I'm gonna go, look, I say this, obviously I'm in a happy relationship with Elizabeth, but I'm thinking in my younger days, if you had the ability to travel across the planet at will, like Picard does in Star Trek Picard, your friends, and you'd be like, hey, let's go to Tokyo and go party, in Shinjuku, whatever. I mean, wherever you go, or let's go. So you'd be meeting girls that you would like, or I would assume girls would be meeting guys who they would like all over the world. If you could travel that way, there'd be all kinds of mixing and all of that. And I think that's our destiny anyway. So it's a good question. Is Liet Kynes white? I don't know. I mean, obviously in the movie you get Max von Sydow, who's from Sweden. Yeah, he's a white dude. But I would think the people on Arrakis, especially if you're Fremen and you've been there for a while, I wouldn't imagine there'd be a lot of white people on that planet. That white skin would change very quickly. That's just me. But I don't know. That's a good question. Mukbang Review sends in a super chat and says, do you remember Brittany Murphy? I do. When we were talking about food in your live chat and ramen came up, and so I thought of The Ramen Girl, 2008. I love that movie. So I know somebody was posting pictures. I've never seen it. Also in Girl Interrupted and 8 Mile. Yeah, I like Brittany Murphy. Sad about that. Brittany Murphy was good. Mukbang Reviews sends in a super chat as well and says, you've talked about the importance of testing, but can you speak to issues regarding false positives and negatives? I hear about it in your live chat. Yeah, I mean, there's always false positives or false negatives and all this. That's why we have to have better kinds of tests. But the fact is, we're in a situation where we have to exercise. We always have to err on the side of caution, because if you have somebody that's infected and they go to the latest Coldplay concert at the Rose Bowl, where people are in close quarters and you're eating and all that and breathing on people, that's a bad thing, and it'll just come back. And we'll be in the same position that we're in now. I mean, we were able to curtail. California acted very quickly. We've been in, I believe, how long? I don't know when the order came out. Was it the 16th? I mean, I think today marks a month, a full, 31 days, 30 days. We've been in lockdown. California came out and got out in front of it. That's why our numbers haven't gone that high. And also because we're in cars and all that. So we're lucky. But, yeah. But yes, there's false positives, there's all kinds of craziness out there. It's tough. By the way, speaking of tough, our man Jeffrey Mao is here. And I'm going to read his letter. He wrote this on April 13th. Hi, Rob. Sorry, I know someone out there doesn't like me drinking water into the microphone. Hi, Rob. Recent chats, articles, and stories that have come across the desk of Robservations talking about the current plight of the cinema industry and home viewing alternatives have me thinking. It's been mentioned many times, and for many of us imagination connoisseurs, it is a goal to get as close to the cinematic experience as possible at home. While the current selection of widescreen 4K HDR TVs is amazing, nothing beats having a projector to get even closer. It wouldn't be snobbery to suggest that projectors are better than TV for viewing films as close to the theatrical experience because, well, that's what we're all seeing in the cinema, right? A projected image reflecting off a large white screen to silver screen. I've had a projector ever since I first started to own my own home. At first, it was my old Acer 1080p projector, and I didn't even use a screen. I just reflected it off a white wall, and it was good enough. Then, when we were looking for a new house, one of my priorities was having a basement that I could turn into a decent home theater. I'll probably follow up this letter with a little video tour of my basement. Ooh, I love that. But the centerpiece of the home theater, other than the sound, is the projector, I believe, and I do believe you are correct, sir. The pros of the projector are that it's cheaper than most TVs, and it can project an image size that would become really expensive if you had to get a TV size even close to it. Amen, brother. I wish that weren't the case, but it is. The downsides are that you do need to mount it, though the new crop of short-throw projectors add in portability and convenience, albeit at a much higher price point. I've seen those projectors you can put like 2 feet away from your screen, and you're beaming up. I'm like, does that work? I guess it does. You also need a big enough open wall to either project onto or mount a screen. Also, having a portable short-throw projector kind of doesn't work if you can't move around the sound system with it. A manual screen around 100 inches is around $100 to $200 on Amazon, and when you add with it the cost of the projector, it still beats most 4K TVs. Projectors are view-only devices, as they do not have the electronics to handle streaming services and tune to television. And the bulbs do burn out eventually, so that is a consumable item on the projector that you have to consider. But really, you have to see the difference between a film on TV versus the projector to understand. And in my current setup, I can watch the video simultaneously. Although that TV is my older HD, it's still a reasonable comparison. I find it hard to describe what the difference between the two, just that it looks more like a real movie on the projector. As Austin Powers would say, it's a certain je ne sais quoi. I think what it might be is that on a TV, the image is being pushed out to you, whereas with a projector, it's being reflected back at you. When you watch a TV, you have to look through a glass screen, so there's always some kind of sheen or reflection to it. So it's probably true that you need to watch in either dark or low light to get the optimum experience with the TV. Yeah, with mine, there's no reflection. There's reflection when there are dark scenes, but when it's bright, there isn't. There's probably also something to do with the fact that your eyes and brain are seeing the image in pixels as directly displayed. However, when the image is projected, then reflected back, some of the harshness, the digitalness of the image gets reduced, but not losing any clarity or sharpness. It's the same when you see a print of a digital photograph versus a developed print of a chemical photograph. It's just not the same. And for anyone who's old enough, you can really tell the difference. Yes, you can. It's all somehow just more pleasing to the eye. So I definitely will follow up with a video where I show you all around my basement. Ooh, I'd love to see that. And try to show the differences between how a film looks on my TV and then on my projector, and see if you can see the difference between a Blu-ray and a 4K UHD. That will require a little bit of work and editing, so it might take a few days. Thanks, and keep on being singularly post-geek. Jeffrey Mao. Jeff, thank you for that. Look, I'm a huge, huge fan of projectors. But I'm also like, unless you have the proper room, in addition to having great sound and a great projector, you also need the venue. You need the room where you can get the room black. A projector, again, ambient light diffuses the light that your projector is throwing to your TV. So when you turn down, unless you have a really powerful projector or indeed a laser projection system. I have a very well-known filmmaker friend of mine who has a home theater. It's about $1 million home theater. His projector was $500,000. And it's amazing. It's an actual movie theater projector. So it's a projector that's built to be used in a movie theater with that kind of a throw. A throw is how far the projector is away from the screen. It's throw, but how far the light is going, basically. And his projector is incredible. And I've never been in a home theater I think of all the home theaters that I've ever been in, the throw from his projector to the screen is the biggest I've ever seen in a home. In a home, I should say. And it's his picture, and it's $1 million home theater. And that's all it is. And it's amazing. Although he never plays movies loud enough for my taste. But yeah, I think the projector experience, from what you're saying, it's a different experience. But you really need a projector that's bright enough and and a room that's dark enough that that's why movie theaters are pitch black. That's why there's no windows in movie theaters. You can't have that ambient light because it gets in the way of the image. Oh, you know what? I forgot to answer James Kevin's question about what did I think of Chaykin's Black Kiss series. Howard Chaykin wrote a series called Black Kiss and Black Kiss 2. Let's see, I can't see. Here is Black Kiss 1. Black Kiss 1. And here is Black Kiss 2. Now, let's see if I can. I can't even really. I would get a. I don't know if I would get struck. It's black and white series. It's a noir series, but you know, as you can imagine, here's some of the art. I love Howard Chaykin's art, but yeah, it's. Let's just say it's. I would say it's definitely NC-17, if not X-rated. I loved it. But, you know, Howard was, he was not a happy camper at that point in his life. He was a little mad at the ladies, if you know what I'm saying. So, yeah. I love the series, but it was a little rough, a little hardcore. But it is hardcore. It's a noir story. It has to do with filmmaking. It's yeah. If you want to know what it's about, I would suggest going to Wikipedia and Googling Howard Chaykin's Black Kiss. Yes. Apparently he wrote it after he got divorced. And he wasn't in a good place. This comes from Garen Gillum. Hey, Rob, I hope you and your loved ones are doing well. And I wish the same for all members of the Post-Geek Singularity. I wanted to thank you again for the show and the continuing hard work that you put into it. I briefly had a YouTube channel focusing on RPG actual plays and RPG reviews, but it wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't enjoy doing it as much as I thought I would, which is just fine. At least I tried it, now I know it's not for me. One thing I learned though was how much work it is and how much effort it takes. This makes me appreciate your channel and my other favorite channels that much more. I've heard you say a few times that what you cover on the show isn't really important compared to what is going on in the world at the moment. Well, yes, that's true, but that's also precisely why we still need the show and your voice more than ever. I appreciate that. While so much of life is paused these days, it's comforting to still have those things that remain consistent, such as Robservations and the John Campea Show. So, as always, a big thanks. Why, thank you, sir. I've mentioned in previous letters that one of my favorite parts of Robservations is hearing about your favorite things. We share many of those favorites, so I feel confident that if you do like something that I haven't watched or read yet, odds are I'll like those things too. I always enjoy when you pull out a book, movie, or omnibus to gush over that I haven't experienced yet, because I'll add them to my ever-growing online shopping wish lists. I love that. That's why I love sharing things. That said, as much as I like Howard Chaykin, and I recommend Howard Chaykin's work to a lot of people, I would not necessarily recommend Black Kiss to everybody. Just read a little bit more about it if you were planning on buying it. But I love that Dynamite finally put out a hardcover version of Black Kiss. When this was originally released, the comics came bagged. You couldn't open them up. It was in a you had to open up the plastic bag. But I love that, talking about tabletop games, you know what? I can't really reach it, but I have was it SDI? My friend Mike Schertz bought the Dawn of the Dead role-playing game. It's more like a skill game, but I have a sealed version of it over there that I haven't even opened. I love that game. In a letter from a few months ago, I wrote that you got me back into collecting physical media years after I sold all of my DVDs. I mentioned in that letter that I was up to 50 discs. Well, now I'm at 140 discs and box sets. Look at what you've made me do. I'm buying Blu-rays and 4K discs I previously had on DVD, but also films that I hadn't seen before. As an example, The Long Goodbye. I've been an LA Hollywood-based noir fiction and film fan lover. Double Indemnity is one of my favorites, but I'd never seen this film until last night. I've known about it, but I never watched it. The main reason was because it put Philip Marlowe into the present day. Well, 1973, which is hardly the present day, but you know what I mean. I know. That didn't sit well with me because I always envisioned Marlowe in the 30s, the 40s, because, that's where he was from. Of course, that's the whole point of the film. Elliot Gould's Philip Marlowe is basically a man out of time, a 1940s private eye trying to make his way through the hippie, grass smoke-filled, yoga-stretching Los Angeles of the early 70s. Plus, Sterling fucking Hayden, man. I dig it. Also, I've picked up films that I'd only watched on broadcast TV before as a kid, so watching those now in HD on a 55-inch TV is pretty great, I must say. I finally watched the full version of Saturn III after only seeing the broadcast TV version over 35 years ago, and let's just say I never knew what I was missing. Laugh out loud. Well, that's all from me this time. I have a few more things in mind, but you may be hearing from me again soon. Garen Gillum. Well, Garen, what a delightful letter that is. Yes, for those of you who don't know, if you've never seen Stanley Donen, yes, Stanley Donen, who directed Singing in the Rain, Stanley Donen directed a movie, I think it came out in 1980, that stars Kirk Douglas, Harvey Keitel, Farrah Fawcett Majors, and a robot. And Farrah Fawcett Majors and Kirk Douglas are living in bliss, and he's like, could be her father, but they're living in bliss together on this sort of moon, and Harvey Keitel and his robot come for a visit. It was one of those movies that was made, and it was, it's only okay. I mean, it was in the wake of Star Wars and Alien, and yeah, and they tried to make it a woman imperiled movie. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can recommend it. What did you think? What did you think of Saturn III watching it now? Believe it or not, would you believe that Omar94 is back? Omar's like writing every day. Hi, Rob. What is your take on black and white movies being colorized? I hate that. Hate it. It never looks real. No verisimilitude. Black and white movies can have verisimilitude, just so you know. And I hate it. I can't watch colorized movies. A number of black and white movies like the original 1933 King Kong, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, and Casablanca get colorized and have clips or the whole movie on YouTube for everyone to see. I have mixed feelings. On one hand, I like seeing these movies colorized as there is a certain beauty and glamour to seeing the sets, the costumes, the special effects, the hair and makeup, all in color. On the other hand, it is a bit of an eyebrow raise as it's very strange seeing a black and white movie get colorized as I'm not used to seeing it in any other way than the original black and white. Thanks, live long and prosper. Well, Omar, I hate colorized black and white movies because I love black and white. I love what black and white looks like, and now on Blu-ray and now 4K, to preserve the original intent of the photography. I mean, my God, Citizen Kane looks amazing in black and white. I love black and white photography, and to see it besmirched like that. What one of the great revelations of my life was seeing the CBS restoration of the Twilight Zone on Blu-ray, the original Twilight Zone. I've been watching it on TV. I'd grown up watching it on NTSC television, which sucked, but everything's fuzzy. And to see those episodes razor sharp, the black and white, some of that black and white. You watch Eye of the Beholder. I think the high def versions are streaming now, but my God, Eye of the Beholder was like seeing an episode, even though it was still black and white, seeing it in high def. Oh my God. And I remember getting those discs, and I couldn't watch them fast enough. I went back and rewatched the entire series. It was amazing seeing Twilight Zone in black and white. I mean, it was incredible. Incredible. Yes, so I love black and white. I hate seeing black and to me that's like you would not go recolor someone's painting. You wouldn't do that. So why would you colorize a black and white movie? It's fake. It's fake. It's phony. It's not what they wanted. And yeah, if they had color film or whatever at the time, maybe, but there was a choice made. There's a lot of black and white movies, the 60s, Frankenheimer, The Train, 7 Days of May, My Beloved Seconds, The Manchurian Candidate. They were made in the 60s and they were made in black and white. I wouldn't want to go colorize those movies. Lolita. Kubrick could have made Lolita in color. He could have gone for a red shoes look, but he didn't. And kill me if he did that. But he loved black and white because he was a photographer. Anyway, this one comes from Alain Alain Denet. It must be Alain Denet, right? He's written in before. Hi, Robert. As you were excited as blah blah blah. Let me start again. Hi, Robert. As you were excited about Dune as I am, I thought you would find the list below interesting. Have you ever seen a cast this stacked before? Denis Villeneuve, director, Oscars, 1 nomination. Eric Roth, writer, Oscars, 1 win, 4 nominations. Timothée Chalamet, Oscar, 1 nomination. Rebecca Ferguson, Golden Globe, 1 nomination. Josh Brolin, Oscars, 1 nomination. Javier Bardem, Oscars, 1 win and 2 nominations. Oscar Isaac, Golden Globes, 1 win and 1 nomination. Stellan Skarsgård, Gold Globes, 1 win. Charlotte Rampling, I can't believe Charlotte Rampling's in this movie, for the win. Charlotte Rampling, Oscars, 1 nomination. Mary Parent, who's a producer, Oscar, 1 nomination. Hans Zimmer, composer, Oscar, 1 win and 9 nomination. Greg Fraser, the cinematographer, 1 nomination at the Oscars. Joe Walker, the editor, 2 Oscar nominations. Patrice Vermette, production designer, 2 Oscar nominations. Carl Probert, the art director, an Emmy, 1 nomination. Jacqueline West, costumes, 3 Oscar nominations. No. That's why I'm very excited to see this movie. This movie is A-list all the way, and I cannot wait. Cannot wait. What's not to love about all of that? Bang that stuff out. Tim Davies is here. Tim, who we know as Timbulus Spider Monkey. Hello, Tim. Hey, Rob, the Spider Monkey here. It's been a while since I've written to you. So I decided this letter would have to be something special to make up for it. But what special subject could I delve into? Something extremely personal. Something that makes up some of the most fundamentally important parts of my psyche. What else but a subject I've teased you with before? My love of Star Trek. Gosh, I don't want to hear the rest of this. Just kidding. I'll try and keep my thoughts on its current predicament to a minimum. If I didn't, this letter could take up the entirety of your show. Oh, please do. Yes, this means a stupidly long, self-serving letter is incoming. Put the kettle on, folks. For starters, let's take a trip backwards in time, back to where my love of sci-fi was truly born. Before this, I'd been a fan of the Star Wars franchise, but I always knew it was something different. It was a fairy tale. Anyway, on to my story. It's 1984, and I'm 8. My grandfather, who would be the biggest influence on my taste, gave me a copy of The Hobbit, telling me he thought I'd like it. A week later, he asked how far I was into it. He was very happy to hear I'd finished it. And the next thing I knew, he'd given me copies of both Lord of the Rings and C.S. Lewis's Narnia books. For an 8-year-old, this is the equivalent of giving someone 1 swimming lesson then dropping them into the middle of the ocean. But swim ashore I did. It took me a while, but I made it. From here on, I gleefully read everything he gave me, which was almost exclusively fantasy. Lord Dunsany, Ursula K. Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea, Robert E. Howard, I devoured it all. Then a day came that he gave me some books by Arthur C. Clarke and H.G. Wells. From that day on, sci-fi was my great love. I thank the memory of my grandfather every day for fostering this love of the written word in me. In later years, he introduced me to Stephen King, James Herbert. Oh man, I read all of James Herbert's books. And H.P. Lovecraft. One of the happiest days of my life was when I was able to give him my copy of the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, which he hadn't heard of, but he loved it after reading it. Tales of Thomas Covenant, The Unbeliever. It was also through my grandfather that I was introduced to Star Trek. Knowing how much I love literary sci-fi, he decided I'd also take to Trek. Again, he knew me too well. Of course, I was drawn in by the space setting and starships, but it was the writing and the way conflicts were usually resolved with minimal violence instead of using intelligence to think around problems that kept me interested. I was taken by the fact that people like Robert Bloch, Theodore Sturgeon, George Clayton Johnson, Harlan Ellison, and Richard Matheson all wrote for the show. Yes, and they were all writers and novelists themselves. I love the characters, especially the triumvirate of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. I couldn't get enough. I watched the series again and again whenever it was rerun. Years later, after I'd seen the movies that were out, I got my hands on a VHS copy of the animated series, and while I didn't like it as much, I still loved it. Then, in 1987, I heard we'd be getting new Star Trek, but it wouldn't have the original cast in it. What kind of madness was this? It couldn't be as good as the original, could it? Well, yes, it could. As much as it pains me to admit this, I think I like Next Generation a little more than TOS. What? No, I understand. It had the same feeling as the original. The same standards in the writing, but with an updated modern slant on it. It just spoke to me more. I understand, because you were sort of coming of age and getting older as it was on the air. So it's okay. As far as I was concerned, I'd found my Star Trek, so imagine my surprise when the next series that came out, one that supposedly drastically differed from the ideals of the first 2 shows, turned out to be my favorite. Was DS9 the most different vision of the future in the franchise so far? Yeah, sure. But that had a lot to do with the fact that it was the first time we got a long look at what this future looked like from the non-human perspective, which really appealed to me. How does Starfleet deal with people whose primary concerns aren't whether or not they're going to sit around and study ancient alien art, or if they want to watch an android perform Shakespeare? As Sisko says in the second season episode, The Maquis Part 2, it's easy to be a saint in paradise. So seeing that not every civilization is as enlightened as Earth as the characters' reaction to this made the series feel more fleshed out than the other shows. Maybe that's just a byproduct of long-form storytelling that DS9 exhibited so wonderfully. As much as I love DS9, I can't help but feel sad that it was, for me anyway, the high watermark in the franchise history. I agree with you there, absolutely. I've loved everything that came before, but everything that came after disappointed me. Voyager started off okay, it did, but once they showed their audience their terrible poker face and let us know they had no ideas left by making everything about the Borg, it lost me. Enterprise I kind of enjoyed, but I never loved it the way I did the other shows. Most of the characters annoyed me, apart from Hoshi, who I had completely valid reasons for liking her character, or as I like to say, Empress Sato. Oh yeah. So I wasn't even slightly invested in what happened to them. As I said earlier, I won't go too deep into the more recent iterations other than to say what is being produced now is not my idea of Star Trek. They are sacrificing the legacy of the franchise for a quick boost in views by people who wouldn't usually call themselves fans. All I can see happening is that the new shows will be forgotten a few weeks after they've aired, and the next water cooler show comes along. Is Star Trek a water cooler show? It has to be. If a water cooler show has to appeal to a wide margin of people, a wide array. At the time, the franchise's core audience will feel completely distanced from what Trek is now. Who's talking about Discovery now? No one. Well, we still talk about the original series over 50 years after it aired. I can't even bring myself to talk about the travesty that is Picard because it's still too painful for me. It pains me very much to say that as far as I'm concerned, Star Trek is dead. It died in 2005 when Enterprise was canceled. Campia always brings up that as evidence that modern Trek is good because it was dead before the JJ movies. I always say to the immortal words, I always say to that, the immortal words of Judd Crandall, sometimes dead is better. That's Pet Cemetery. I was trying to do my Fred Gwynn there. Okay, I've taken up enough of your time. I'll leave you as always with a quote from Groucho Marx. This sums up my feelings about watching New Trek pretty well. I drink to make other people interesting. That's my excuse. Until next time, stay swanky. Tim, a.k.a. Timbula, the spider monkey. What a delightful letter, Tim. You know, it's so funny that, again, you never get successful in entertainment chasing a trend. You get successful creating trends, setting trends. And you look at all the great TV shows, you know, whether it's, I don't know, think about all the ones that we talk about over the last 25 years. Everything from NYPD Blue and St. Elsewhere, LA Law, ER, all the way into the shows now, whether it's The Sopranos, whether it's Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, whatever the shows you want to cite as your favorite, The Wire. These were all shows that were fairly groundbreaking for the time and what they did, whether it was serialized storytelling, the maturity level of the show, what was going on. They were setting trends. And when I look at Star Trek has fallen into the trap that the James Bond film franchise had fallen into in the 70s. In the 60s, the Bond film franchise was the trendsetter. You know, people were looking, they were vicariously living through Bond. Bond was a huge, huge, huge international phenom. Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball. These were hugely successful movies because they were setting the trend. And by the time you get to the 70s, Roger Moore is chasing blaxploitation in Live and Let Die. He's chasing martial arts movies in Man with Golden Gun. Spy Who Loved Me changed it up a bit. And then Moonraker chasing Star Wars. And Bond now, Quantum of Solace was trying to chase the Bourne films. Star Trek now, the people who are writing Star Trek now do not want to be writing Star Trek. They want to be writing Game of Thrones. They so desperately want to be popular. They're like, me, look at me. We're going to put all this violence and sex and incest and lesbianism and tokenism, and we're going to be, everybody should talk about us. They have failed on every count. They have failed. Star Trek should be setting trends. Star Trek should be dealing with things that we aren't seeing on television. You know, that's what we need to see. We need to see Star Trek needs to take us forward, not repeat what we've already seen. Let's make it more like Game of Thrones. Well, look how Game of Thrones ended. You know, Game of Thrones was great when they had George R.R. Martin's books to adapt from. And then they sort of lost their way. In the 8th season, I understand some people enjoy it. But I think it betrayed every character in the show. They betrayed their own story. And that's problematic. And Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Discovery betray Star Trek every episode. We should be getting the Tiffany standard of science fiction television. And all we're getting is retreads of 10 other different shows. And 10 other different movies. There's not a shred of originality in any of modern Star Trek. And you're right. And it's a show that I get it. If you've never seen these kinds of things before, if you're not up on your science fiction, if you haven't seen a lot of science fiction movies and you're new to it, you might enjoy it. You might enjoy that they're pandering attempts at diversity and the fact that, you know, if you want to show certain characters, we're getting the most dumbed down, cliched version of. I mean, you know, I've had friends of mine who are gay who are offended by the portrayal of the gay couple in by Stamets and Culber in Star Trek Discovery because of how pandering it is. And it anyway, I don't want to go off on a rant. Rick Green has a letter. Hey, Rob, I was talking to my mom on the phone tonight, and we got into talking about how the movies will be affected by the shutdown and social distancing. She mentioned that it was movies that helped save people during the Great Depression. Ooh, I like your mom. Very good point. Movies gave people hope and took their mind off the situation. I think entertainment in general is helping with the pandemic as well, if only on streaming media. Netflix's stock price has boomed. They've got new subscribers. I read today that people are streaming 8 hours a day. Crazy. This includes free concerts online and videos by actors such as John Krasinski's Some Good News, which is great. John Krasinski's show is great. This kind of entertainment is important to keeping us all grounded and bonded in this scary time. I think the entertainment industry will play an important role in helping us through this, as it did for the people going through the Great Depression. I also think this would make a good topic for the show at some point too. Well, I'd like to say that this show is an example of exactly what you're talking about, Rick, but I think you're right. And I think, look, people are watching things. I'm just happy people are going to get around to streaming devs because I think it's so exciting, which is great. And what's not to love? So, yeah. Here's a letter from Stubble McShave. Hi, Rob. I saw the news a few days ago about Disney doing a photorealistic remake of their animated Robin Hood movie. I was filled with lots of questions, and more questions have formed since then. The first question was, why? Later on, I started to wonder, how will this look? Will they be bipedal, or will they be made to look and act like real animals? Will they have clothes? Will they have opposable thumbs? Otherwise, how does Robin Hood fire a bow? Will the rhinoceros guards have clothes, armor, and spears? Will people still think that the foxes are hot, or will that be weird? How does a photorealistic fox disguise himself as a photorealistic stork? Will the movie feature a city with a castle, or will they make it into a story completely set in nature? There are 10 other questions I have. Will this be a masterpiece or the next Cats? The animated show how the characters emote in a human-like way. If they animate in the same style that The Lion King was animated, then it'll be very difficult to evoke interpersonal or inter-animal emotions. Rob, what do you think? Is this a disaster or a masterpiece in the making? Thanks, Stubble. I've been asking. I'll tell you a funny story. My friend Sean Fanning, who's passed away. He passed away in his early 40s, much too soon. He and I were working on an animated show that we had sort of co-created, called along the lines of Disney's Robin Hood, called Time Wolves. And they were about a group of genetically altered wolves that were overseen by Mr. Bliss, a mysterious Maybe a Bond villain, maybe a saint. You don't know in the show. And the Time Wolves were being sent back in time because one of their own, the first Time Wolf, the Black Wolf, escaped using this time travel technology, and he was going back in time trying to destroy humanity by fucking up the past so animals could once again inherit the earth because of the way mankind was treating the planet. And our group, the Time Wolves, had to go back in time and interact with him. But here was the thing. They were super intelligent wolves that could talk and everything. And Sean and I, our biggest argument that we ever had as friends or anything, we got into a huge argument when he said to me, he goes, so like, how are these wolves going to be able to ride horses? Like, if they're going to put suits of armor on, how are they going to walk upright? And I said, well, we'll genetically alter them that they can be like werewolves. They can change their appearance. They're shape-shifting wolves, so they could stealthily they could be wolves and go into encampments or whatever. Hopefully they're not hunted, but that was always an ever-present threat. But then when they get in, they would werewolf style grow up, and they'd be able to walk. Like lycanthropy would be a big part of the show, and that's how they were genetically bred. And Sean could not get past that. He's like, that's the stupidest shit I've ever heard. And he was the artist, and I was the writer. And he's like, that's so dumb. And I'm like, no, why is it dumb? We can make it however we want to make it. And how funny would it be when you're wearing a suit of armor that has one of those triangular snout part things that come out, the face guards, and that's really a wolf inside. He's like, I'm not going to draw that. And so, I had written we're going to do it as a comic book, and we wanted to do it as an animated series. And we had epic arguments about this, and we could never get past it. We could never because Sean couldn't understand how the Time Wolves could interact with humanity. I go, that's the whole premise of the show, dude. I mean, we can do whatever we want. Now, I would frequently point to Disney's Robin Hood. I'm like, that's like that. It's just they have to disguise their true appearance. They would be hooded and he just couldn't get past it. You just reminded me of that. I don't know how they're going to do it. How do you do a photorealistic Robin Hood in the same vein as the Lion King? I mean, I get it. In the Lion King, the animals lived in Africa and they were animals. But in Robin Hood, they're animals that have been anthropomorphized into those classic Robin Hood characters. I don't know. My answer is I don't know. That cracks me up. A Jet sends in a tip and says, "And God spoke. What a great mockumentary that is. How close is this hysterical mockumentary to real filmmaking? Too close for comfort." If you guys haven't, I think Arthur Borman directed And God Spoke. I think so. You got to check it out. It's hilarious. I mean, I don't know if it's streaming. It's kind of a movie that's sort of fallen by the wayside, but it's right up there with movies like Spinal Tap. I'm not saying it's as good as Spinal Tap, but it's along those lines, and it's really good. Mukbang Reviews sent a $10 super chat. Can you correctly say the Dune people or places? Well, I don't know if I'm terrible with names, but here's how I've always understood them to sound: the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, the Fremen, and Arrakis. Another YouTuber mispronounced every single name. I was admonished by one of your mods by pointing this out. Really? I don't know. As far as I know, it's Bene Gesserit, Fremen, and Arrakis, just like it's Liet Kynes, Duke Leto Atreides, the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV. But, it's always, I understand, people have been reading these things. Whenever I don't know how to pronounce something and I have the time, one of my favorite little pastimes, here's another insight. I love going to just how to pronounce whatever. Liet Kynes, how do you pronounce that? You find out. And then you can see how do they pronounce it in different countries, and it's right there. So one of the things that I'm doing more than ever is people's names. How do you pronounce, and fictional names? Paul Moadib, Usul. Tell me your homeworld, Usul. Shai Halud, I think. I mean, these are Dune things. The Landsrad, Mentats. Dune. That's how I pronounce them. I hope I'm doing okay. Mukbang Reviews sends in a super chat and says, can you say anything about Trials and Tribulations? My mom dislikes DS9 but loved this episode. I'm trying to convince her it's great Trek. Well, she loved DS9. If she loves Trials and Tribulations, you know what the problem with Deep Space Nine is, I think, is that the first 3 seasons really shifted in tone a lot. It was a show that I remember Mark Altman used to joke about how it shifted its premise. It changed its premise each season. And that was kind of true until you got to Way of the Warrior. I think the show really started to sparkle in season 4 with the Way of the Warrior, with the Klingon War breaking out. But I mean, I liked it. I remember seeing the end of I remember the end of the Jem'Hadar, when the Odyssey, the Galaxy-class starship, the Odyssey, is destroyed by Jem'Hadar suicide run. And I'm like, I thought that was the moment, and that's a second season episode. That's a moment where I was like, oh my God. And then when they did the 2-parter in Purgatory's Shadow and By Inferno's Light, and I was blown away. I couldn't believe where they were going. And that's when the level of storytelling, Deep Space Nine, started to blow my mind. But as early as the second season. And I think it's a terrific show. And once you get into it, the problem is it's hard to get there. You know, it's very, and even season 3 with the added goatee, when Sisko shaved his head and grew the goatee, it's rough. I mean, it's rough. It is rough. But I mean, I love Trials and Tribulations, but again, it's an off-brand episode, kind of like Far Beyond the Stars or The Visitor. Those are like one-offs, and I don't think they do. There's a lot of those. Bada Bing, Bada Bang, It's Only a Paper Moon, that kind of thing. Little Green Men is another off-brand episode that I particularly like. How funny is it? The Ferengi land at Area 51, hilarious. It's true. I love that. But Deep Space Nine, when you stick with it, I mean, it's so rewarding. Season 4, 5, 6, and 7 are, but you got to get there. I mean, people have asked me that I should make lists. I should make sort of a Star Trek primer. Here's the episodes that you can watch. Like, maybe I'll pick 10 of each season, because Star Trek, you know, you're talking about, so it's like a third of each season that you could get a pretty good idea of what to watch. But once you get into the latter seasons of Deep Space Nine, I should do that for like the first 3 seasons, so you can sort of accelerate your enjoyment of Deep Space Nine. I should do that. Isle 3N, is that, Island? Is it Island with the 3 is the E? Dune, sandworms, and modern CGI. I'm all for that, man. If we can get what I'm hoping that what Jurassic Park did for dinosaurs, with CG dinosaurs, I hope we're going to get that with CG and Dune. I'm hoping. I can't keep... I can't. Stubble McShave's letter is going to make me laugh all day. Or all the rest of the day. Omar94 has our last letter for the day. Hi, Rob. This is probably a stupid letter, but here goes. You're as it might be a bit of a touchy subject. Should I end with this? Diversity, female empowerment, and representation are discussed a lot in entertainment now, and I'm all for it, no question. But my concern is how it is executed, as a lot of the time now it seems to be very preachy and in our faces. Shouldn't it feel natural and not hit us over the head to get a point across? Amen, sir. What I mean by preachy and in our faces is that it interferes with the story by putting it all on hold to get a point across. One example I recall was in Wreck-It Ralph 2, where Rapunzel was with the other Disney princesses and asked Vanellope if her problems were solved by a man showing up. I kept thinking to myself that it has nothing to do with the story, as it was put on hold to get that point across. But in my case, I'm thinking about diversity and representation, as it seems like a lot of entertainment now is being made with people of certain backgrounds in order to appeal to them so they don't feel offended. I'm Muslim, but I'm not angered by the lack of Islamic representation, as I enjoy watching and reading plenty of movies, TV shows, comics, etc. without Muslim characters in it, as I can still be entertained by all of that without it needing to appeal to me and my background, as I just like the stories and characters as they are. What do you think? That's just how I feel, but that doesn't mean everyone will feel that way. Thanks, live long and prosper. And as a Muslim, you have to deal with the stereotyping of the Islamic world in a lot of our movies and television, and that's got to be pretty annoying as well. Look, I agree with you. The best kind of representation, when I think about it, Star Trek already did representation really, really well, and Deep Space Nine looked no further than Deep Space Nine. Look at the diverse actors on Deep Space Nine. And they never said, look at our diverse actors on Deep Space Nine. They just did it. You know, and you look at all this, and sometimes they would, like, obviously, Far Beyond the Stars was an episode where they directly dealt with racism, I think, as Avery Brooks probably wanted to at some point. But, I mean, the only way, if you call attention to diversity issues, you're undermining your own message. Because you're being like, look at this. No. You need to normalize these things. If you want to make a black man who's a single father and a good single father the star of your show, do that. But that's all you have to do. You don't have to tell everybody every episode, look, our black leader is a great father and an amazing man. Aren't black people awesome? You don't have to do that, because then it gets distracting. But you know what? You put in an actor like Avery Brooks, you have him, especially by the time you get to season 3 and he goes for the goatee and shaves his head. You know what you do? You write a great character who's portrayed as being multidimensional, having a great relationship with his son, being a great leader, cool-headed, cool under fire, a leader in times of war and peace, and that character just happens to be black. You're going to do more for any kind of representation than going, ding, 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 look at our black character, aren't we? So, no, you're not. If you're drawing attention to that and you're saying, look at how cool we are, you're not cool. You're not cool. You've already lost. You're not getting the kind of representation you want. If you want to cast a character of a certain kind or certain ilk or a certain gender or non-gender or whatever, cast that character and tell stories about that character. But don't go, look at our character of color, or look at our character, look at our trans character, or look at this person. Because what you're doing is you're taking away their agency as human beings and individuals and turning them into a thing. Look at this thing, look at this gay man. No, the point is to normalize all that stuff by showing it as part of everyday life. You know, I don't have friends where I go, let me call up my gay friend Dave. It's time for me to talk to my gay friend Dave today. No. My friend Dave is somebody I've known for 30 years. When I think about Dave, I think about his voice. I think about the funny things he says. I think about how much fun we've had together over the 30 years that I've known him. I don't sit there and go, my friend Dave is gay. No, he's just my friend Dave. I mean, it's just... And today, this idea, I understand. There's a lot of people that haven't been represented before. They haven't seen images of themselves in leadership positions or the lead characters in certain things. I'm totally all for that. I completely understand. There are a lot of marginalized people that haven't had a voice in entertainment. I want to hear those voices. I want to hear the stories they have to tell because they've been marginalized and because we haven't heard their voices, they have new stories to tell that what? I haven't heard yet. All I have to do is listen to them. And they need a platform. They deserve a platform. I want to hear those stories because they're new. But it's just, I mean, it's so crazy. But yeah, just as I've always said, part of the Burnett axiom, you cannot put your agenda, or you cannot put your, but you cannot put your agenda before your characters and your story. You can't. Your characters and your story should inherently have whatever agenda that you want to address should be baked in to both your character and the story that you're going to tell. Otherwise, you've lost. All you're doing is preaching. You want me to buy you a soapbox? Fine, I'll do that. Go stand on the street corner and preach your gospel. But that's not how you tell a good story. However, I will say this. We certainly need to hear the stories of people that had no voice. And the more diverse the stories we get, and the more diverse our storytellers, the richer we are as people. And, Liet Kynes, by making Liet Kynes a woman, I don't think that's tokenism if it's done well. In my mind, you know what? You're gender swapping out a character because the director felt that he wanted more of a female presence in a cast. I feel that way too. You know, I've like when we were working on Axanar, I had a black actress that I've loved for a very long time. That we actually had cast her in the Axanar feature film as the president of the Federation. Now, she's a black woman in her 70s now that I've loved. I'm like, oh my God, my casting director said, we can get this person. I'm like, you're kidding. And I just loved her because she was in a few things that I happen to love. I'm like, if we could get her, hell yes. And I gender swapped a role. It had nothing to do with representation. It had everything to do with that as an actress that's a kick-ass actress, and basically I wanted to gush all over her and tell her how much I like this particular thing that she was in that I dearly, dearly love. But yeah, so I agree with you. I think what we're doing now is we're doing representation badly. But sometimes you're not. The Expanse does it correct. Deep Space Nine does it correct. Of course, someone's going to come at me and go, Rob, that's easy for you to say as a middle-class or a middle-aged white cis male. What do you know? Well, they got a point. That's what I am. But I still think I know what a good story is, and so do you. So do you. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Got some. Go back to these super chats. Detective Boyer's wife. Heidi Boyers is coming in with the assist. Heidi Boyers says, "Yes, Rob, I'm gonna make Jim get his passport." Yeah, lady, because let me tell you, Heidi, we got time. We got time before No Time to Die. Your boy Jim has not been to Europe. Have you been to Europe, Heidi? Have you been? I mean, it's kind of like when Arnold Schwarzenegger, get your ass to Mars or whatever. We've got to get Boyer's ass. We've got to get Detective Jim's ass to Blighty, to London, to the Odeon Theatre in Leicester Square in November to see No Time to Die. So, yes. So, Heidi, let's make that happen. But you got to get your passport, too. I need to renew my passport now. So, I need to. Mukbang Reviews, says I skipped Jim's wife's second super chat. Yes, I knew that, but thank you for reminding me. Please double check. I did. Nick Parrish sends in a tip and says, "What's up, Rob?" So one of my five favorite comic book characters is Jonah Hex. But then in 2010, disaster struck with Josh Brolin. When the movie came out, unfortunately, it was an extra large bag of muddy Pampers. Rob, do you think there will ever be a redo to wash away my pain? Well, Nick, did you ever read the comic series Hex, where Jonah Hex was in the future? Keith Giffen's comic series? I don't know if it was any good. I'd have to go back and revisit it, but I feel your pain. I feel your pain. I don't know, man. I mean, that was a good attempt. I mean, in terms of budget, they gave it the old college try, even though they failed miserably. So yeah. Mukbang Reviews says, "I feel isn't that a bummer when that happens? Now I'm gonna feel the pain of Jonah Hex all the rest of the day." Mukbang Reviews says, "What's the next movie on Liz Views tonight, ladies and gentlemen? We are watching Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, 1970s. It's my happening, and it freaks me out. Wait till you see it. You can probably find it streaming. I have the Criterion Blu-ray. You're gonna want to check it out. It's hilarious." Sean M. sends in a nice super chat. Thank you, Sean M. Interesting point. I think it's not controversial to say that many of the diversity cues in films are included by well-meaning white people. I agree. By contrast, Far Beyond the Stars was directed by Avery Brooks. A very good point there, Sean. The problem is, you know what? Well, yes, white people are well-meaning. I get it. I totally do. I understand that. But just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing. And when you say that Far Beyond the Stars was directed by Avery Brooks, yes, and Avery Brooks has often been an outspoken person for the cause of Black Americans. And I mean, I think there's an authenticity that he brought, and that's why it was a good episode. And I think a lot of Deep Space Nine. You can't. The funny thing about well-meaning white folks, and I'm certainly one of them. Is it for us to tell those stories, though? A movie like Green Book comes out and everybody's critical of it. And I understand. I completely understand that. And if you're basing something on a book. But I have to say that, again, I'm all about authorship. And I'm not saying that is it only right for... Can white people not tell the story or talk about the plight of others? I think no, because I think a great story is a great story. And I think if you are a great storyteller, it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, straight, gay, whatever you are, however you identify, if you are a good storyteller, I think you can tell a story about anything if you want. However, that said, I think that there are subtleties to storytelling. Like if you're telling the story of, like when Steven Spielberg was making The Color Purple, There was a lot of criticism when that first came out. I love The Color Purple, but there's a lot of people that were like, how can you take Alice Walker's book? And, how can a white Jew make this story? Blah, blah, blah. But, he had a lot of people of color on that set. He also had Quincy Jones writing the music. And while I do think that book or the movie has taken a lot of criticism for soft peddling certain elements of the story, whether it was incest, whether it was lesbianism and all that, what he was trying to do was tell a story that was palatable to the most amount of people possible. And that movie made me cry. That was only the second time I ever cried in a movie theater when Sally was reunited. Miss Celie was reunited with her sister, who came back from Africa. That was only the first movie I ever cried in was Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Color Purple was second. But yes, I understand. Was that probably not a great example of that? But what we need are more black filmmakers to tell those stories, to tell their own stories, so people can understand. And, I think a great example, my man Ryan Coogler, who I've never met. I just love him as a filmmaker. I thought Fruitville Station, thank God he made that story, because I think that there is an insight that Ryan Coogler brought to both Black Panther and to Fruitville Station and to Creed. The fact that he was black and could tell those stories made those stories more resonant because he could imbue them with a reality and an understanding. If I had directed either one of those, all three of those movies, they wouldn't have been as good. I would have tried to make them something else. And I think that's why having people, if you want to have those stories told in an authentic way, you need people that come from certain communities who can tell the stories of what it's like to be in those communities. Now, that doesn't mean they're not to be talented. You have to have people that are talented, first and foremost. I would never hire somebody. The problem that we have now is you have people that are being hired into positions based on diversity issues or quota issues or whatever, and they're not as talented as other people. And then from a production standpoint, there are people that are now getting into trouble because they're in over their heads, and that doesn't serve anybody. That doesn't do any good for anybody either, because then it's going to make it harder for the next person to get hired. So it's a slippery slope. But I do think once again, it's all about getting the right people for the job, but it's also about allowing people whose voices haven't been heard to be heard and give them a chance, but they still have to be talented. I mean, that's why I look at a guy like Ryan Coogler. I really respect him, as I've always said, about what he did with a franchise property in Creed, but I also thought Fruitville Station was a really powerful movie. And the fact that he chose to follow up Fruitville Station, I mean, I think it's so badass that Ryan Coogler tells this very socially relevant story about a horrible thing that happened. And it is something that happens far too often in the black community. Somebody loses their life when they shouldn't. Very powerful story. Now, does he decide to go on and become a social crusader? No! His second movie is he uses his ability, he uses the praise, he uses the accolades he received for being a great filmmaker, and he goes and he makes something he really wanted to make, that he was passionate about, which was Creed. And he knocks it out of the park. Now, did he get that job because he was black? I don't know. I think he got that job because Fruitville Station was a great movie, and then when he proves himself as a great storyteller, Sylvester Stallone's like, how interesting that you chose to have this movie be your first movie, and now you want to make Creed. You want to take something I've been doing for 40 years, and he convinced Stallone to let him do that. That is what I think is cool, and it doesn't matter what color Ryan Coogler is. It just mattered that he's a great filmmaker, and he had a great story to tell, and he convinced the one person that would have been the hardest person in the world to convince to make the movie with him. That's what's exciting. And then he goes on to make Black Panther, which is awesome. I want to see more of that. I want to see more of that. But then again, what do I know? I'm a middle class, I grew up middle class, but I'm a white, middle-aged, cis male shouting on my lawn, Star Trek isn't very good anymore. What does that say to me or about me? Well, ladies and gentlemen, what a rollicking way to end this episode of Robservations, a show about something. I have been your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, your viceroy of verisimilitude and champion of imagination connoisseurs the world over. What do we want? Great stories. When do we want them? Now. That's what I have to say. Great stories well told in these trying times. And now we need them more than ever. Streaming 8 hours a day? Man, you're going to burn through. By the way, I have to say that I just saw a trailer for a documentary that's on Netflix called Circus of Books. Now, I don't know if it's your thing, but Circus of Books was in West Hollywood, and it was. I used to go in there occasionally, not for the same reasons other people went in there, but it was a bookstore. It was a lot of weird hanky-panky in West Hollywood going on. There's a documentary about this. I didn't even know it was being made. I'd heard maybe it was, but it's on Netflix right now. Now, I don't know if it's good. I haven't seen it. I just saw a trailer for it today that it got made, so I'm stoked about that. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for the generous support of the channel. I'm glad people are still enjoying me during these times of being sequestered away. It's fun to be here. You've given me a reason. You've given me a reason to live, like Joe Cocker once sang. And they use that song in 9.5 Weeks, too. You can put your hat on. By the way, if you haven't seen 9.5 Weeks, for anybody who wants to watch their Zalman King erotic triptych, you got to watch Two Moon Junction, 9.5 Weeks, Delta Venus. You'll thank me later. Anyway, you don't have to. You can watch Red Shoe Diaries and just, that's all you need to do. But I really like 9.5 Weeks, and I especially love, if you want to see a Two Moon Junction, we should have a conversation about it. I don't know, I think I have it here, but if you, wait, do I? Yes. God love the Brits. This is 88 films. 88 films, oops, in Britain. I was very excited to get this Blu-ray. Thank you for doing that. Two Moon Junction. Get cozy with your significant other and watch a little Two Moon Junction and laugh at me later. Anyway, this is the end of Robservations, episode number 392. Tonight, join Elizabeth, Gwendolyn Bell, and myself for episode 15 of Elizabeth's Whining About Movies. And we're going to be talking about Russ Meyer's notorious and hilarious 1970 film Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, co-written by Roger Ebert. Join us at 8 tonight in a mere 4.5 hours from now. So there you go. Yeah, we're going to have lots of fun tonight, so join us. And I'll be back, of course. I'm not on the John Campea show tomorrow. It's Thursday. And, somebody else. Wait, Sean M. is... people are firing in... did you fire in another super chat? Say the name of the porn film where you have a Biggs Darklighter mustache. Oh, Star Wars XXX. Yes, for those of you who don't know, I do play a non-porn character. I don't have the cock for porn, frankly. I mean, I can wield it well, but I just don't have the cock for porn. So I've never actually starred in a pornographic film. But I'm in Star Wars XXX. I play Biggs Darklighter, and my nom de plume in my porn career is Ross Campbell, which was the name of my reporter character that I played in Superman Returns. There you go. The more you know. Anyway, so yes, Star Wars XXX. It was great. I got to fly an X-Wing fighter. I died in the Battle of the Death Star. It was amazing. I have scenes with Luke and Han. It's terrific. That was a hoot. That was a hoot. A friend of mine was making it and asked me if I want to be in it. I'm like, I get to wear a Rebel flight suit in a movie? Are you kidding? And get in an X-Wing fighter cockpit? It was awesome. I got to teach Kylie Ireland how she should be using her throttle, you know what I'm saying? And that was a thrill. Anyway, I won't be on the John Campea show tomorrow. I'll be back here at 1 o'clock. Thank you for the support. I want to say thank you also to my great moderating staff. Apparently, Detective Jim is now letting his wife Heidi take over, which is the way it should be. Heidi is obviously Jim's better half and more wise than he is because she's finally making him get a passport, which is a good thing. Jim can take his first step into a larger world, literally a larger world like the other side of ours. So I want to thank Mike Bodden for making sure I get letters. I want to thank Detective Jim for having a wife like Heidi. I want to thank Greg Smith for being awesome. And I want to thank Louis Yu and Jordy Lyons for being just who they are. And it's great to have everybody here. Thanks for supporting the channel. Send in those letters to the Burnettwork.net. Smash like if you like this show. Subscribe. Hit the button. The bell. Ring my bell. Like Anita. Ring my bell. Ring My Bell is one of the worst disco songs ever. I mean, I love disco. I'm not like the character that Corin Nemec played in The Stand. I'm not that. I'm not Harold Lauder. But Ring My Bell is the worst disco song that ever became like a #1 hit, just so you know. I know it has nothing to do with anything. But remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say, as always, as I check out of this stream, Now's the time. I'm getting a little giddy, as you can tell. Have a better day.